Everyone joining us here at St. Anne's and everyone joining virtually. We're going to start recording this session, and we have quorum, so we're going to begin the meeting. I'm going to turn it over to Chair Kakani. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who are here virtually, if you have any technical questions, please send a chat message to the host. We'll talk more about that and how to participate in a moment, and we can get started.
All right, good morning. It is 9/11, Thursday, December 14th, 2023, and I'm calling to order the meeting of the Los Angeles County Probation Oversight Commission. I'm Melinda Kakani, serving as chair of the commission during Chair Shea Jackson's medical leave of absence. We have a number of important items on the agenda today, and we want to get started. But before we begin, I want to start by expressing my concern about the probation department's lack of responsiveness since our last meeting, and actually a few meetings before that. At our November meeting, we requested via motion a number of important items, including information about the investigation into Brian Diaz's death and information about the department's progress on meeting the requirements of the corrective action plans with BSCC, the Board of State and Community Corrections at Los Padrinos and Barry J. Nydorf. We've not received any of that information, and it's my understanding that Executive Director Julian's emails following up recently about this information have gone unanswered, and that probation chose not to provide the Probation Oversight Commission with any feedback on the extensive inspections reports that POC commissioners conducted and staff compiled. I will note that we did receive follow-up information about staffing and callouts, as well as requested information about the youth in custody. This body has been working diligently to act as the board's eyes and ears to ensure that the board's initiatives and motions, as well as the 93 reform priorities set by the PRIT, are enacted. More importantly, this body has been attempting to work collaboratively for the benefit of the young people and adults served by probation and the staff of the department. I certainly expect that the department will immediately comply with the POC's requests, as they are required to do so by county ordinance, and that the Office of the Inspector General will support us with taking next steps to compel compliance if the department will not willingly work with us. And I want to lift up two other things that I failed to mention. A few meetings ago, we had agendized the JJCC, or Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council dollars that had gone unspent by probation. And Chief Guillermo Villarosa was here and stated that it's very clear that the department has lost trust. And for that reason, the department had decided to hand over the management of certain buckets of dollars within the JJCC to the Department of Youth Development. In the vein of seeking trust, I just want to reiterate, by failing to respond to these motion requests, by failing to respond to a request to Mr. Sanders about how many young people, especially at Barry J. and in the compound and within the SYTF population, are being cycled through our adult facilities, not having received any response to that, that really undermines the trust that both the community and those of us sitting here are trying to cultivate with probation. The request around the contract between probation and the law firm by the name of Harrell Cantrell to deal with the backlog of use of force cases, to understand why it was that that firm was selected, why it was that that firm was selected when they are the same firm that's representing the county and probation in the thousands of sex abuse lawsuits that have been filed over the last year. When that same law firm has been deemed by the Sheriff's Department as the law firm of the year for defending them in use of force cases. Things like that do not garner trust when there is a request for information and it is repeatedly not complied with. So I just want to name that we're not asking of these things just for fun and games, right? The issues facing this department, especially at Los Padrinos and Barry J., as you will hear later in our inspections reports, are quite literally life and death. And I certainly expect and hope that the department shares our goals and the board's goals to aim for a standard much higher than simply abiding by the law, but also that the department abide by the law for the good of the community, especially for the good of the youth who are currently incarcerated and adults and youth on probation, and for their own staff. And with that, I'll turn it over to Wendy Julian, our ED, for some opening remarks and to explain how you can participate.
Thank you, Chair Kokani, and good morning to everyone joining us in person and virtually on WebEx or listening on YouTube. I know we have later on the agenda today the nomination of new officers for the 2024 year. And so I wanted to take a moment just to say thank you to Chair Kakani and to Sean Garcia-Lays. In the background in preparation for these meetings, both of them have been diligently working to help prepare the agenda, move things forward, help us process information requests, have additional meetings. It's a lot of extra work, and they have stepped up and also volunteered, and I'm just very thankful. So I appreciate your service. I want to encourage everyone to participate in today's meeting. Those of you who are joining in person and on the WebEx, please send us your comments in writing at info@poc.lacounty.gov, or you can raise your hand. You can do that by clicking on the little hand icon at the bottom of the WebEx. If you have any trouble with that, please send a message in the chat and you will get a response from our host. Please do not send your public comment in the chat. Only the host of the meeting sees that, and it doesn't comply with the Brown Act, and the commissioners will not receive it. But we'd love to get it in writing, or you can raise your hand and say it when we have public comment. We will be having public comment on each agenda item after the presentation is made and before the commissioners vote on any motions. Also, there will be an opportunity for general public comment at the end of the meeting. Thank you for being here, and we really ask for you to appreciate the space and participate and share your thoughts and do so within the time frames that we have provided. Our meeting is being broadcast live to YouTube, but there's no engagement with users on YouTube. Please subscribe. The YouTube channel is full of interesting information, including videos of each meeting. You can follow our social media accounts on Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads at LA County POC for more information and also some of the research that we're doing. Buenos días, bienvenidos. Ya se ha iniciado la conferencia por WebEx y si le gustaría hacer un comentario público o hacer una pregunta, puede escribir preguntas técnicas en la función del chat o también puede usar el botoncito de levantar la mano, es una manita en la parte baja de la página y así puede hacer su comentario público. We will give 2 minutes for public comment, and that will be at the discretion of the chair, depending on how many people are signed up and how much time we have left. Le daremos a las personas que están haciendo sus comentarios en español 4 minutos, 2 para su comentario y 2 para traducción. Podemos proveer traducción o usted puede proveer su propio traductor. So thank you very much. I'm going to call the roll, and we'll start with Commissioner Dolores Canales. Commissioner Frankie Carrillo, Commissioner Sean Garcia-Lays, Commissioner Jackson continues to be on medical leave. Commissioner Sam Lewis is traveling today and excused. Commissioner Don Meredith, Commissioner Eduardo Mundo, Commissioner Diane Terry, and Chair Millie Kakani. Chair Kakani, we have quorum. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let's proceed to item number 2, which is the approval of the November meeting minutes. Wendy, do we have any written public comments or live public comments for item number 2?
We do not. And Chair Kakani, I'm going to take a moment just to talk to the staff. It looks like maybe there's something not functioning with the call-in number. Can you see whether are there any call-in users logged on? Okay, so it appears that we do have call-in users logged on. I think, Ismail, if you could maybe put a comment on the YouTube page with the call-in information and as well in the WebEx chat with the call-in information, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Just want to make sure people can get connected.
Can I have a motion to approve the November 9th meeting minutes? We have a motion by Commissioner Canales, seconded by, thank you, Commissioner Mundo. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, commissioners, please unmute yourselves and vote with the voice vote.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. So we'll proceed with item number 3, in which we'll hear from a number of panelists regarding continued efforts to reduce overcrowding and support the goals of Youth Justice Reimagined by reducing the county's reliance on incarceration at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall and other Los Angeles County probation facilities. There are 2 board motions that specifically direct the probation department, public defenders' offices, the Probation Oversight Commission, Department of Youth Development, and other agency partners to do this. Both are linked on the agenda if you want to view them. Wendy will give an overview of this work and introduce our panelists today.
Thank you, Chair Kakani. I'm so excited to have this item on the agenda today. As many of you know, we've pushed it back a couple of times due to time and also to try to be able to provide more information. I want to say that while everything that Chair Kakani said is accurate about the lack of responsiveness to the Probation Oversight Commission's requests for information related to the items she mentioned, one area where the department has been providing significant information is on data around the youth who are incarcerated, in particular youth who are incarcerated in the juvenile hall. That has allowed the team at the Probation Oversight Commission, for the first time in the 3 years of our existence, to be able to provide the public and the board with some information about who we have that are incarcerated. You will find in a number of different places where there's been public information, much of it created by Sharon Harada sitting next to me, that does share this information. The department shares it in some locations through their ProbeStat biannual report on juvenile status. You can see some of the information on race, et cetera. Also, the department is now including race, gender identity on the daily population statistics that are shared with a number of internal sources, including the courts and other partners. So this information is not new, particularly around the demographics, but what we are hopeful about is that it is information that will be able to be shared in a more engageable format where the public can understand it, and most importantly, decision makers at the county and in other agencies, including law enforcement and the courts and other agencies that have an impact on the juvenile justice system, to help make decisions that can help move us toward Youth Justice Reimagined and a reduction on reliance on incarceration. I'm really excited to present some data today on the racial geographic demographics. And later on in January of next year, we will also be presenting some information and publishing a report on the charges and law enforcement agencies who are arresting young people, and hopefully on some of the ways that the decisions are made about young people being detained in our facilities. So you heard Millie mention in the introduction that the focus is on Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. So let me just get into that and explain a little bit about why we're focusing on what we're calling the juvenile hall population. Right now, Los Padrinos is the only functioning juvenile hall in Los Angeles County. That is new as of July of this year, of course. And so some of the data includes young people who went through intake at Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall or Central Juvenile Hall and continue to be incarcerated at Los Padrinos. So that's why we're calling it the juvenile hall population, just to be completely accurate. So as I said, probation's leadership team shared a data set with the Probation Oversight Commission. It contained completely redacted and anonymized information about the youth detained in the juvenile halls in a snapshot. It was provided for the date of July 27th, 2023. And then we received a second snapshot to compare that to for August 24th, 2023. We're using this data to publish a series of reports to describe to the public and the board the population of youth who are incarcerated. There are several limitations on the data set, and I'm sorry, I forgot to say one of the most important things about what I'm reporting today. This information that I'm sharing with you is information that we have been working very hard to get. All of the commissioners have been working hard to get it. In particular, Commissioner Mundo has helped us to review and revise this data set. Commissioner Terry is working with us to help with the presentation of the final report. But this would not have happened without my colleague, Project Director Donisha Smith, who should be here giving this presentation right now, but had an emergency today. So please know that the reason that we're able to present this data is because of having our new project director on board. So limitations of the data set. So first of all, it's a snapshot of 1 day or 2 days. So we can't make broad generalizations about the data because there may be variations. And in fact, it's a snapshot of a summer day. And summer days in the juvenile hall population tend to be different than days, for example, right now in December. It does not contain information about youth who are dispositioned to residential treatment facilities, what we generally call camps and Dorothy Kirby Center placement. So this is just looking at juvenile hall population. It also does not include what probation's detention recommendation was. It does not include information about whether or not the child also has an open child welfare case. It does not contain their LA detention screener risk assessment score or any other contextual information that could help us have a deeper understanding of who the youth are and the circumstances around their alleged crime. But even with these limitations, the data set contains very useful information that helps us develop a profile of who's in the youth juvenile halls. So like many of the folks in this room, both who work for probation and the public defender's office and community-based organizations, Department of Youth Development, I've been doing this now pushing 30 years. There are a lot of the information I'm about to share with you is information that is well known to folks who are in this arena. You can see it when you walk into the halls. It is not necessarily new information, but what we're excited about is being able to share factual information about Los Angeles County that correlates with what we know from national research. So there were 342 youth that were detained in the halls on July 27th. That includes the SYTF population at Barry J. Nydorf, because the report on July 27th was for both Barry J. and Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. So for that reason, our report focuses on the pre-adjudicated youth and what we're calling the juvenile hall population. We excluded the 62 SYTF youth, secure youth treatment facility youth, and focused on the remaining 280 youth that we've referred to in the data set as juvenile hall population. And let me just say, this data set has not yet been published, but we're expecting to publish it very soon. We're actually going to send it to probation first before we publish it and share it with the public and the board to ensure its accuracy. So you will be seeing this publicly soon. Our biggest intake or takeaway from the data set is the extent to which Black youth are overrepresented in the juvenile hall population. It is like I said, is information that is well known by people who have worked for a long time in the system or people who have worked for 2 weeks in the system. For example, of the 280 youth detained in the halls on July 27th, 57% identify as Latino, 37% identify as African American or Black, 4% as Caucasian, 1% as other, and 3 were blank. So for reference to that, we compared this data to our county's population that we found on the US Census website. So based on census data, African Americans, including all age groups, make up about 9% of the county's population. Do you remember what the population I said was in the juvenile hall? 37. Equally interesting is the underrepresentation of white and Asian youth when compared to the county's population. White and Asian youth outnumber Black youth in population size in LA County, yet they're almost non-existent in the population of detained youth at our juvenile halls. This illustrates a disparate impact that the juvenile justice system has, including and beyond probation, on youth of color, and how a flawed system creates unjust outcomes. And so we hope that part of the discussion today will be to talk about, in addition to the structured release and decarceration efforts, significant efforts around prevention and diversion, and in particular, efforts that will address the needs of Black youth. The vast majority of the youth detained in the juvenile hall are what's called case pending disposition case status. This means that they're waiting for their case to be processed and heard before a judge. Of those 280, 240 were in the case pending disposition status. There's an extensive body of research from scholars and researchers across the country that raise alarm about the harm caused by pretrial juvenile detention. And last year, the National Bureau of Economic Research published a report indicating that it can lead to a 31% decline in the likelihood of graduating from high school, which is a key indicator affecting economic health outcomes in adulthood. There are many other harms, including increasing the likelihood that a youth recidivates and exacerbating mental health problems. The other interesting information that came from this is that the data set included the zip codes of where the youth resided before being detained. The common areas and regions where these youth live are, it's actually quite concentrated. They live in South Los Angeles, in the city of Los Angeles. They live in Southeast Los Angeles County, including small cities like Bell, Southgate, Santa Fe Springs, and Downey. And they live in the Antelope Valley, including Lancaster, Palmdale, Leona Valley, and other unincorporated areas. To better understand the socioeconomic makeup of these neighborhoods and regions, we used USC's Neighborhood Data for Social Change portal, which allows us to compare these regions to countywide data. And when you look at these comparisons, you'll find that the communities with high concentrations of our youth who are in the juvenile hall also have high concentrations of Latino and African American residents. They also have above average concentrations of poverty. And that includes things like high unemployment rates, high percentages of households with very low income. Very low income is defined as 50% of the area median income. So when we think about who the youth are that we have incarcerated in our facilities, I think it's really important to start with this context around the systems that lead to youth ending up in our juvenile halls. Our forthcoming report will include information about the length of time that the predisposition youth have been incarcerated, data about the charges they're facing, and recommendations about how decision makers in the field, including probation and beyond probation, might improve the intake process to align with the board's Youth Justice Reimagined framework. We're very excited about releasing the report, and we couldn't do it without the collaboration of the probation department, both to help us understand the data and to provide the data in the first place. So I appreciate that transparency. And with that, I'll introduce the panelists that we have here with us today. So to my immediate left is Sharon Harada, who represents the probation department and has been instrumental in helping us to receive and interpret this data. And then we have Luis Rodriguez from the Office of the Public Defender, Eric Rodstrom, and I'm going to make you tell me what the name of your organization is now because I don't have it coming off of my lips easily because it's new. Yeah. Independent Defense Counsel Office. Thank you. Formerly known as the panel. LACPA. Yes. Great. And Michelle Newell, who's here with the Department of Youth Development. And then virtually, we have Sam Abramian with the Alternate Public Defender's Office. So I'm going to turn it over to Luis to begin to talk about the experience that they've had in implementing and reporting on the board motions related to structured release, least restrictive alternatives, and girls' decarceration.
Okay. Can you hear me? Thank you, Wendy. Chair Kakani, fellow commissioners, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this very important subject. And if I can just, I know many of you have heard the history, but for those in the public who haven't, how it is that we got here. So there's two, I guess, platforms that we're going to be dealing with. One is the structured release program, and the other one, which is what we've called the TMDTs, the Transitional Multidisciplinary Team Meetings for Girls and Gender Expansive Youth. As Wendy talked about early on, thankfully this board saw the importance and the urgency in making sure that we got out and kept out as many youth as possible in the system. And we've talked about trauma, and many of you have personally dealt with that, and professionally as well as youth. And so it's very important that we start investing in at this stage. So a few years ago, we came up with this, thanks to the board, in an effort to work with probation, to work with the DA's office, to work with the courts, to work with departments like DMH and now DYD, thankfully, and looking for a way to provide a plan for the court to release the youth. As all of you know, the ultimate decision maker is the court, whether a youth is going to be released or not. So in the last few years now, we've been working with probation in two fronts. One are the TMDTs, which deal with the girls and gender expansive youth. I can tell you that the marching orders for our attorneys are that every single girl or gender expansive youth who comes into custody must be informed that they have the right to have this TMDT. And this TMDT is a team meeting with DMH, with DYD, thankfully with probation, and many times other community providers to see what kind of services we can provide for this girl, gender expansive youth, to provide a packet to the court for this youth to be released. We've been doing that for the last few years. And thankfully, the numbers for girls and gender expansive youth are a lot smaller than they are for young men. But there's a major problem, and it continues to be a problem, which is the resources that we need for the youth to be released, mainly housing. The hardest thing, the biggest obstacle that we have, generally speaking, but specifically for girls and gender expansive youth, is where can they go? Sadly, many of them cannot go home for various reasons. And unfortunately, many of the providers, the restrictions that they've imposed make it very difficult for us to send them off somewhere else. I've had conversations with Wendy. I think there's some good ideas in there. And as far as how to expand the list of providers, because right now, I think, in my personal opinion, the options are very limited. And therefore, if I, as a defender, or my staff as a defender, can't come up with an option as to where this girl, gender expansive youth can go, the court's not going to release that youth. So that is the continuing problem that we've been having. And it has to do with the list of providers and those providers who are willing to relax or change the requirements that they may need in order for this girl, gender expansive youth to be released. So that's one track. The other track, which we've just started earlier this year, we've been working closely with Ms. Harada and her team in the structured release, which applies to all youth. And this is really, it was a board motion looking at non-707B cases and the kind of cases that could be considered for early release. Now, again, these are pending predisposition. They haven't pled guilty or there hasn't been an adjudication. So our goal is to get them out of custody before the case is resolved. In these situations, I can tell you that the limit has been the guideline from the board that it be only 707B cases. And it is what it is, but it's something that I think we can overcome if we start expanding the list of who can be considered for this. And that meeting is structured in a similar fashion as the TMDTs in that you have a team. You have probation, DMH, thankfully DYD, other community providers, and seeing how we can release this youth. In that situation, it's a little bit easier to get folks out. We have a little bit more resources. And thankfully, just to give you an example, this last week, I got a list from Ms. Harada of about 10 youth, just as to the public defender youth. I'd say 8 of those 10 had already been released. The other 2 have some complicated cases that I'm not allowed to get into, therefore unable to get out. But that I credit to the work that our attorneys have been doing, working with the DA's office and with probation in the court in getting these youth released. So the effort is there, but the obstacles continue to be housing. And the other one, the unnamed one is, and we talked about this early on, we need everybody involved in the system to buy into this, to buy into the belief that the right thing to do is to release these youth as soon as possible to minimize trauma and to look at different ways that we can change things. Some of the other obstacles that are not part of what we're discussing are sometimes, unfortunately, the bench order requirements by the court. And sometimes I'm not going to name names, but sometimes certain bench officers, their standing order is if this kid violates, bring them in. It doesn't matter what the violation is. I can tell you about 3 weeks ago, I was doing a site visit in one of the juvenile courts. I was sitting there, and it was not one of our clients. This youth was out of custody. The youth was brought in because he was showing up late to school on a daily basis, showing up 30 minutes late. And this youth was living with his older sister. Older sister got up before the court and said, look, he's helping me out with my kids. Our mom is not around. He's helping me out. And so it takes me half an hour to drop him off. Unfortunately, the probation officer assigned to that case, I think it was one of the situations where our kid or the child or the youth just failed the attitude test because the probation officer kept talking about things that the kid did in the past. He was smoking pot. He wasn't checking in with him on a weekly basis. He just didn't seem to be bought in. Those are the words that were being used. Ultimately, the court felt that that youth would be better educated and treated by being incarcerated. Kid was detained. I talked to the attorney, offered some suggestions, but the bottom line is we need everybody to be fully invested, that the right thing to do is to keep these youth out. We've had great conversations with Judge Espinosa and Judge Arakaki in the conversations that they have with their bench officers and changing the attitude. It's been slow, but they're committed. And I'm not saying that they're slow, but the process has been slow to change. So those are the continuing frustrations that we deal with. I can tell you that our numbers, the public defender numbers, I can only speak to our office, keep dropping as far as the youth who are detained. But let me finish with this so I can stop monopolizing the conversation. The biggest impact that we can have, and we won't even get to the detention youth, is when the youth is arrested. Fortunately, in our office, we have a 24-hour, 7-day Miranda duty. We have an attorney on duty 24/7. So we get a call from the county operator. As you may know, earlier in the year, there was state legislation that required that probation contact the defense attorney within 2 hours of the youth being arrested. Probation's been doing a tremendously great job. We are getting those calls. That is the point of contact where I think we can make the most impact in making sure that the youth doesn't come in. Because of those of us attorneys on the panel and in the audience, it's a lot easier to keep a youth out once they come out of custody in court than to try to get them out once they've been detained. So I throw this back again because we've had discussions on this issue, which is when the youth is detained, what better options can we have in bringing different stakeholders at that point to make sure that that kid gets released? Because I can assure you, it's a lot easier to go through the process when our client is out of custody. So anyway, I'll stop talking.
Thank you. We'll go next to Eric Rothram, and then following, we'll connect with Sam virtually.
So I don't want to be too redundant. Our program is smaller than the public defender. Our caseloads are smaller, but our experience is essentially identical to the public defender's office in both the TMDT meetings and the structured release. The new IDCO program, I'm expecting in the next year to have quite a bit more ability to track data that will be relevant. But right now we're in the middle of setting up the program for case distribution. So I did not bring data as I think parsed out as the public defender's office has today. Anecdotally, I can tell you the programs have been used at a rate that is kind of proportionally similar to the public defender by our attorneys. Because of our subcontractor relationship with the attorneys, we cannot, oh, sorry about that.
It's mostly for the virtual audience. Thank you.
Thanks. So we have a subcontractor relationship where we cannot mandate that they participate in this program. However, looking at the numbers before the changeover and kind of anecdotally before this meeting, I checked with our juvenile panel. Our participation rate has been pretty successful. It kind of tracks with the public defender's office in the same way. One thing I wanted to point out that we had, I think that's encouraging about these meetings and what I would say a successful aspect of them. We had a particular client who did not fit either the female or gender expansive youth or the kind of requirements of a non-707B for structural release. And probation was very active in including this particular youth who had other mitigating circumstances to his case that made this a valid program for him. And we were able to receive a release recommendation for that client who really was in danger due to being exposed to enemies in the environment that he was not really able to be safely protected from. So looking at these programs, I would, from anecdotal evidence and from evidence before the transition to the new program, I would say that they have been successful and helpful. One of the issues I think that I wanted to bring today that fits into the idea of the case pending specifically viewpoint of what can we do about clients being in during this pendency of their case, the issue of wait times for interviews for our attorneys. that is something where we're getting reports now pretty consistently of a maximum wait time of about 4 hours. I've received that from multiple other partner agencies and then internal attorneys and investigators. We've been notified of at least one investigator who will not take juvenile cases any longer from the panel because they simply cannot wait long enough. I have seen some encouraging reports from probation in other meetings that they're purchasing additional interview pods for Los Padrinos. But I think we've been hearing about that for approximately 6 months now. I don't know that I have not heard that they're available yet. That's probably the most urgent issue now, I think, facing the attorneys that I'm hearing from our side. And I think beyond that, honestly, Mr. Rodriguez laid out our defense experience regarding these two programs, which I think overall have been successful.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go next to Sam Abramian, who is with us virtually.
Hi, Wendy, and good morning,
Hi, Sam.
everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
We can, please proceed.
Excellent, thank you. Going third obviously doesn't leave me much to add because I echo the sentiments of both Luis and Eric. The wait times, thank you, Eric, for bringing that up, because I think one of the biggest issues with our minors, and perhaps the attitude problem that sometimes probation thinks they have, has a lot to do with their not seeing their attorneys. Our attorneys have such a great relationship with the minors, and being able to see them and talk to them and prepare them for their meetings with probation and their court appearances has a lot to do with their attitude in the facilities. So that's definitely, and I know we've also heard about these pods, and we're still waiting for them to be available. So that's definitely an issue. Our attorneys have had, I think, better success in court in front of the judges as far as getting our minors released. So I'm not saying the MDT process hasn't worked. We have been successful. We only have, I believe, a handful of female or gender expansive youth that are still in custody, and because of the intricacies of the case, the limitations fall there and not because of anything else. But we've been successful at least approaching judges sometimes to say, hey, judge, and we're basing it, unfortunately, on the conditions of LP, Los Padrinos, and being in custody, and saying, this is what's going on. We need to move for this minor to be released, either back home or wherever it is. But then, as Luis stated, the lack of programming and places, that's what makes it the most difficult. And I know that that's hindering this process of having these youth released. It's where are they going to go? I've said this, and Luis was great in the way he pointed it out today at many different meetings since taking over juvie for our department. And that's with various groups, with DYD, OICR, our roundtable meetings. It is definitely the mindset of everyone involved. This group I'm speaking to here, we're all, I believe, on the same page. So it's others perhaps that are part of the system that have to have a different mindset when we are dealing with these minors. If we are not all on the same page, it is going to continue to make this process difficult. I'm still encouraged by the work that we're doing, but if everyone isn't on the same page, and if we don't see that same minor in front of us, it's going to continue to be an issue. So we as defense attorneys, when we see a minor, we have a certain relationship and an idea of who we are dealing with. But if you have a probation officer in front of us, maybe they don't. If we're dealing with a certain person from the district attorney's office, then maybe we don't. And if we're dealing with a bench officer who perhaps isn't on the same page, these are the issues that are going to continue to make things difficult. So when we see that minor come into court or into the system, how we deal with that person right from the get-go, if we are not on the same page, it is going to continue to make things difficult. I see success. I see our attorneys being successful in court in trying to work with everyone, but that has to continue being the number one goal, is to make sure those who are involved in the juvenile system have the same beliefs. You can be on different sides. We all have a job to do. I understand that. You're a district attorney, you are prosecuting, I understand that. You are a judge, you are making decisions. Defense attorneys, we know where we stand. But if we are not all with the same mindset and on the same page, it's going to continue to make things difficult. That's my 2 cents, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Newell. That's quite a setup for you, Michelle, to talk about the alternatives. Thank you.
Sure. Is this loud enough? Yeah, that feels loud. Yeah, so these are all tough acts to follow, but, you know, we stand in partnership. Department of Youth Development, I think, like, this agenda item is at the core of what we were created to do and what the purpose of Youth Justice Reimagined is, right? It's to get young people out of the camps and halls, prevent them from ever going in, and ultimately build up community-based support so that they can thrive, so they can be with their families, so they don't ever end up in the justice system. And so we've been approaching this issue in sort of like our first, I guess, little bit year plus of existing as a department in a couple different ways. We have been involved in these structured release meetings. And so, you know, the motion had said, like, as legally permissible, bring DYD in. And we've really sort of encouraged and now been able to have it be where we're invited to all of the meetings. And what we try to do to offer value in that space is to connect with the attorneys beforehand and to basically see if we can help with any potential resources, to like really inventory all the resources that we're aware of. Where is a young person going home to? What are their needs? What are their strengths? What would really help them? And if there's any way we can connect directly with community-based providers, make those phone calls, make any of those sort of advanced connections that could support a structured release meeting being successful, that's where we try to offer value. For a lot of the young people, they need a lot more than that, right? They need housing, they need placement options that don't exist. So we recognize that right now, like, that's, you know, really the core of the work we need to be doing. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But we do just sort of stand as like a connector, an advocate for young people. And really, I think we have a range of community-based organizations that we're starting to work with in youth development work and in diversion work that we just get on the phone with and try to connect to the attorney to see if we can help get them out. In terms of the decarceration of girls and gender expansive youth, DYD submitted a implementation plan to the board about 6 months ago. I believe it was in May 2023. And this was a long collaborative, like year-long process with a lot of the folks in the room here connected to the Youth Justice Advisory Group, so like the YJR body. And through that, there were a number of priorities that were developed. And so we're sort of in the first year of implementation on those. And so I'll highlight a couple that I think will be most relevant to the conversation today. The first is really looking at placement issues, placement housing issues. And that involves a demonstration project of something called the Safe Healing Center that is targeted for 2024. And the idea is to start with 1 to 2 safe healing centers for girls and gender expansive youth directly connected to the decarceration efforts and the board's direction. And so these are small home-like settings, and really home-like is supposed to be in the way they operate, they feel. We've had a great partnership with Designing Justice, Designing Spaces, who's really been able to inform what does that really look like? What is a young person's experience? These are small settings, and what's being proposed right now is that they would be unlocked open settings, but it's really to serve as an alternative to detention. And so this could be, you know, ultimately this could be pre-adjudication, this could be post-disposition as a replacement for camp. And so we have been, there's a work group, we've had a real collaborative process and are moving into really thinking about, you know, criteria for providers and all of that so that we can move forward with this demonstration project. It's starting small. We know we need a lot more of these to really address the number of young people, but we believe we really need to start somewhere and that we need to really fill sort of these placement gaps. The other things we're doing around really trying to figure out the housing and placement issue or for girls and gender expansive youth is looking at how to support resource families. That was a big thing that came up of really addressing the fact that they're funded at a pretty low rate. And if we can sort of have a pilot around that and encourage more resource families to be available for these young people, as well as supporting community-based organizations in navigating the STRTP process and really helping support them in taking some of these cases, some of these harder, deeper end cases, so that there are more options for young people to not have to be in juvenile hall. Another thing we're doing that I think connects to this like mindset challenge is we've been working really closely with Vera on their action network to end the incarceration of girls and gender expansive youth, and coming up with a judicial engagement strategy to really think about how we provide learning exchanges and opportunities for all legal system partners, and particularly for the bench, to really understand who are the girls and gender expansive youth that are in the system, why are they there, where are some potential protocol and policy changes that could support, where are there options for them to go instead of being inside the juvenile hall. And so that's something that we'll be moving on in 2024, is really thinking about this judicial engagement piece. And then the last two things I'll just touch on briefly is I think the POC is aware that we launched a couple months ago the Credible Messenger work for the unit, for the girls unit inside Los Padrinos. And so our partner Young Women's Freedom Center is there 5 or 6 days a week, building deep relationships with the girls. And a big part of Young Women's Freedom Center's model is about supporting them, like release planning, welcoming them home, like that piece of it, like their community-based work is super strong. And it was a reason why we thought they would be an amazing partner for this. They're only a couple months into this work, but I think we feel hopeful that they're going to help prevent some of these girls from cycling back in as they deepen the work, and as we start to then also work with the SYTF, the 5 girls who are at Dorothy Kirby, through their partnership. So I think that hopefully we'll start to see sort of the fruits of that as we get into 2024, and they've been there longer, developing those deep relationships. And then just the last thing is we're just partnering with the district attorney, defense counsel, and others on POC as well, on really looking at what can we do more around sort of intake for young people who maybe there might have been overcharging. There might have been cases where we're finding out in that first 24, 48 hours that they don't need to be in juvenile hall. And I think it's still a question mark as to whether any of our diversion providers could be a resource, whether we can just help connect to services. But I think we're hopeful that we can be a partner in this in the first part of 2024. So I will stop there. That was a lot. But yeah, we're just deeply committed to whatever we can to move decarceration forward.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Michelle. I think that's a great segue into Sharon to be able to talk about the probation department. I'll also say, I appreciate you saying that last remark you said about the what happens on intake, because one of the things that I've certainly learned during this process is the role of all of the other players in addition to the probation department, perhaps in particular law enforcement agencies. It's something that Commissioner Garcia-Leyes has brought up in these meetings, and that we are reviewing on the intake forms is about rates and consistency with the law enforcement agencies, at which rates they bring youth into the facilities, whether that's changed based on the geography of Los Padrinos in comparison to the previous geographies, how it compares the level of charges that certain law enforcement agencies bring youth in compared to other law enforcement agencies. So you can expect to see that data in our report, thanks to the information that's been provided by probation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Harada.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Kakani and Chair Kakani and fellow commissioners. I also want to really acknowledge all of our partnerships and collaboratives in this process, because we would not be able to do it alone. And of course, we always want to be support the Public Defender's Office, IDCO, the APD, DYD, of course. Put this here. And also DCFS, DMH, Children's Law Center, the District Attorney's Office. So all of the partners have really, I think that our big takeaway from this whole process is that the system really works because of the staff on the ground in the courtrooms and all of that who work diligently to support young people and to try to expedite release wherever possible. And we found that when we've scheduled meetings, and then by the time the meeting dates gets close for some of our BOS collaborative team meetings, we've had to just cancel because the young person had been released. So we appreciate all the work on the ground for all of the staff who are in the courtroom and all of the support staff, but that's been our biggest takeaway, that a lot of the processes do work well. What we've found too is that the enhancement of meeting on our Thursday meetings, when we do have them, because they're scheduled based on, and thank you to our attorney partners, the cases that they believe that we really need to consider as a whole for the county, that it's been an enhanced like resources or other things that we brought to the table that have really supported the current process that's already in existence. So that's been a great thing. We all do know that, and we acknowledge, and I support and echo that resources are always needed, and in certain communities we find that they're more needed than others, as well as we've been looking at particular cases who are predispo. Predispo was included in the board motion, but also they are the young people who are newest to the detention facility environment. So we believe that if we can move forward on those more quickly, then that helps our whole process and for these youth and their families in general. And we found that the several areas we paid particular attention to, not only gender and gender expansive youth, but also those youth pending competency hearings. We've been successful in some of those, which has been great, as well as some of the youth have crossed over from dependency. DCFS has poured a lot of resources into the process. We had a young person who I believe they really tried over 40 placements, and we're finally able to get the young female released, which was great. But it took a lot of work, and every agency has done such an outstanding job. Do we have a lot to learn? Do we need to move forward? Do we have to grow up? Of course. But we have also used every resource we have currently available to the extent we could, and we're moving forward. I did want to give an update on some of the numbers for the BOS collaborative teams. So we've had a total of 43 meetings. And of the 43 meetings, 40 young people have been released. So there have been some delays for 3 young people. 2 are related to some competency hearing processes, and 1 youth who has been ordered to, has a disposition, recently ordered dispo, but does have some medical issues that they're attending to prior to the transfer. So those are the 3 that have remained in juvenile hall as of Monday. So we did look Monday. And we also did a quick review of the young females in our juvenile halls for 12/11, which was Monday as well. On that date, we had 22 young women who were detained at Los Padrinos. And of the 22, when we rechecked yesterday, 6 had been released. So we have a total of 16 young women in juvenile hall from that date that we looked at the data on Monday. So just to give a little bit of an update, the reason for detention for those 16 young women who remained detained from Monday's numbers, 8 were bench warrant, 5 were 707B, and 3 were court detentions. So direct court detentions where the young female appeared in court and the court detained them in court versus coming through our intake process. So just a little bit on demographics to support what Wendy mentioned. 10 or 45% of the young women are African American, 10 or 45% are Latino, and 2 or 10% are Caucasian. So that's just some updates on numbers. I wanted to build on what was already said, but not be repetitive. But we have really appreciated the work. We're always willing to work, and we know we need to continue to work internally with individual staff and as a whole, because we have to model behavior and move forward, not just with our young people, but with also those who work for us, so that we can all be moving forward together. So Wendy, I think I'm going to stop there, and if there's questions.
Thank you.
Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments for item number 3?
I had not seen any written public comments up to now on this. If there are people in the audience who'd like to give public comment on this, please approach the podium. And if you're listening virtually, if you can click on the raise your hand little icon at the bottom, or send a message in the chat that you want to be in the queue. Or if you are calling in, you dial *3 on your phone, and that will put your number in the queue. Okay. Okay, we're going to start with Adrina. Adrina, Ismail's going to unmute you, and we'll see if we can get you on. Ismail, are you putting the timer up on the, okay, if you could just let me know when the timer ends. Adrina, can you unmute yourself?
I'm not sure if you could hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
We can. Thank you. Thanks for being here, and you can begin.
Good morning. This is my comments as far as the efforts to reduce the overcrowding on Los Padrinos. You know, when it goes to like the school violations and probation violation, for example, my son, he got detained for having possession of a firework at school. While here you have probation officers like Reggie Torres and teachers being placed on leave for bringing in with a lot of evidence for bringing in drugs to deal to kids. And here you're incarcerating a kid for something minor like a firework, which, disrupts his household, his living conditions, everything. It's just, for me, doesn't make any sense. And, also the kids can't post bail. It's like you guys treat kids worse than adults. They're not allowed to post bail. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? So a lot of them are sitting in jail while still on trial. So that's a problem too. And then just based off my experience with the public defenders, I've came across some of them and I just feel like they're crooked too. Based off my experience, they have the attitude we're the kids' clients. We're not your client. But they don't keep that same attitude in the beginning. For example, Kristen Gazawa. When I was with my child, in the beginning, she was including me. And when I went back, she discluded me and left me in the court completely confused about what's going on. So I had to raise my hand to ask a question, and Christina Al-Hill kicked me out for that because I raised my hand and had me surrounded by police and made us restart the whole process again. That didn't make no sense to me. And I asked her, why didn't you consult with me or let me know what's going on with my son's case? And she said, I'm not your attorney. I'm your son's attorney. I don't have to answer to you. But then keep that
Thank you,
same energy
Adrina.
from beginning to end.
Adrina, that's
Okay.
your time. Thank you. We welcome your comments on further agenda items. Also, I'm very interested in your comment about the posting bail. This is something we've talked to a few commissioners about, is the Probation Oversight Commission providing some support with some of our friends from the Public Defender's Office and the DA about understanding the juvenile justice system for the public. It's definitely something we're interested in, is helping to explain the differences. So thank you for bringing that up. And we'll go next to Lupe Ross. Ms. Ross, can you hear us? You may need to click unmute on your. She shows up as unmuted, Ismail? Oh, try clicking unmute one more time, Ms. Ross.
Okay, can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay,
we go.
thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I have two concerns here. My main one is that this is a wonderful program that I've listened to from all three of the legal departments in LA County. But my concern is that when the kids come home, where are the probation officers? They're working at LP. So the families in the communities don't have them to go to clarify services, to help them get them back in school, or just to help them find services in the community. This to me is a real problem. If probation department can't get enough staff to work there and they keep taking our family community probation officers, then it seems like probation is setting itself up for a program that's not going to work right now. Maybe if they had enough staff, it may be a very good program. I think it would be. That's what I have to say on that. My second issue is that I listen to this program every month. I try to participate. I've been having problems with this mute button, but I think I finally figured out what's wrong. But I see a problem when this is the second month in a row where the director of probation is not there. To me, there is nothing else more. This is the Los Angeles County Probation Department. The head of the probation department should be not scheduling any other meetings. This is the most important meeting, unless he's meeting with the president, which he's not here. This is the most important, the Oversight Commission, for the director to be attending every month. And that's all I got to say for right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ross. Do we have anybody else online? Okay, we'll go next to Crystal Jones. Crystal? For those of you who have been on our meetings for a long time, WebEx actually changed their process. It used to, when we unmuted you, you were unmuted. Now you have to unmute yourself. So it's actually not you not being able to figure out the system, it's that the system has changed. So if you can unmute yourself after we send you the request. Sure. I didn't hear what you said. Ismail, Lena Mallet? Lena, if you can unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
You can
sorry.
proceed.
Thank you. Lena Mallet with the Children's Defense Fund. I appreciate today's updates. One question and concern that came to mind in talking about the judicial process. We know a lot of times that probation officers present in the courtroom have a really heavy influence on in their recommendations to the judge. And I would be curious if the POC would be able to initiate some kind of investigation looking into that. And secondarily, curious about Luis's point about expanding the list of providers, because we know there's that trap of referring youth out when they have nowhere to go to. So curious about looking into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. We'll go back to Crystal. Oh, okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Okay, we'll move to Commissioner questions or comments, and we'll start with Commissioner Mundo.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for implicating everybody. Too often we sit here and we point the finger at probation. So it's nice to hear that it's just more than probation. And speaking of probation, I'd like to thank probation. I've been asking through Wendy and through Chair Kakani for data, and it's been coming quickly and completely. And it's helping us to take a look at what we can do on the front end. Because that's really the easiest point where we can divert. And your call for everybody getting on the same page resonates with me, Mr. Rodriguez. It's what I've been saying for 30 years. This is a collective effort. And it's one that I've seen that can work. I like the structure of the system. With the exception of bail, I would like to see something a little more open for the juveniles that have more serious offenses that are restricted. That restricts probation from releasing them just because of a booking. So, but thank you. And I think that we're moving in the right direction.
Go ahead. Okay. Commissioner Terry?
Hi, just a few follow-up questions. You had mentioned that there were some child or restrictions. I think when you were talking about some of the releases and there's like housing restrictions that make it difficult to release some of the young women and gender expansive youth. Can you share what those are and what some of the challenges have been?
You know, and it sounds so commonsensical, but certain, unfortunately, there are mental health issues that require special treatment that some of these facilities are not equipped to provide. That has been one of the biggest ones. The other ones, the charge that the youth may have been filed on. Sometimes it may be arson, it can be assault with a deadly weapon. Certain providers will have restrictions as to the type of offenses that they will accept. So it's the one-on-one service that can be problematic, and it's also the internal restrictions of, well, if this youth is charged with A, B, or C, we're not going to accept them. So just to give you a general idea.
And then just thinking of the comments that have been made, and is there a way that family members can be more involved in the team meetings that are taking place, or are they already involved? Are probation officers invited to those meetings?
So-
Law enforcement? So I'm trying to just understand
No,
the
absolutely.
players.
Great question. As defenders, our commitment is to our client. And so the first question is, do you want to participate? Yes, I do. Do you want us to contact, sometimes they don't have a parent. It's a grandparent or an uncle or a tia or a tío. So do you want us, and sometimes they'll say, no, I don't want them there. But we do offer our client the opportunity to bring in somebody who is close to them. So they're always given that opportunity. As to probation officers, that is part of the process. We will invite probation after the first team has met. In other words, the first team is DMH, the youth, maybe LACO, us, to discuss issues that may be sensitive legally that we don't want law enforcement to know about, that could be related to the offense. And so, and probation has been great. I have to commend probation because they've been very understanding and supportive of that. And the DA's office comes in at that point as well. Because again, our primary responsibility is to protect this youth. So yes, we do involve them. And sometimes you'll be surprised. Our youth will want their community probation officer to be part of the discussion. In fact, some of the CSEC girls will want that probation officer assigned to that court to be part of the TMDT. So some very, very fruitful and inspiring relationships. But again, going back to Commissioner Mundo and what we've discussed, it takes the person to be involved. That makes a difference.
Okay. And last question, and I'm not sure who to direct this to, but do we know anything around like recidivism rates for the youth who've gone through the team meetings? Like, do we know about how they do once they leave to kind of know, you know, how effective this approach is, and is it really helping to kind of reduce youth from coming back?
So generally speaking, I think 1 or 2 youth at least have come back and then left again. But we can look at that and then include that data in the next board letter, because now it's been a while. Because usually, you know, the first, I think, board letter that when we report it back, it was, I think, a couple months. So we, over time, we can tell more, but we will include that. Thank you.
Commissioner Carrillo?
Good morning. Ms. Newell, I was just wondering, is there other counties who we can model after who are doing the work that we would love to see here in Los Angeles?
Yeah, we actually just brought that up in a meeting yesterday with OICR, who I know is here today, but like really looking at what other places are doing in terms of step-down facilities, least restricted placements. So we're definitely looking to that. We also, there were a handful of jurisdictions over the last year or two during some of the Youth Justice Reimagined work and the Youth Justice Advisory Group, where we looked at for the Safe Healing Center concept. So I think both in the US and outside the US, really looking at like, where have there been these home-like with a strong community-based partner that are really reducing detention and serving young people in the community. So yeah, and I'm happy to share any background information after this too, because we definitely want to learn from elsewhere, from other places in California and from places across the country and internationally as we try to like truly reimagine what we're doing. Yeah, appreciate that question.
Commissioner Garcia Leyes?
Hi. So I have to confess, I am actually a little lost as to evaluating whether or not any of this is actually working well or not. I mean, I look at the general numbers and I see the number of girls and gender expansive youth confined is not dramatically lower than it was a year ago. And the reports are a little unclear to me whether or not, and from what I'm hearing, are these decarceration team meetings resulting in youth being sent home, or are youth being sent home before the team meetings even happen or during that process because of other things, right? So it sounds to me like we're hitting all of our goals or our objectives, but not our goals, or maybe there are other things that are just being more effective. But I'm not sure. So, Luis, can you start with maybe being a little bit more candid about whether or not these programs are successfully getting kids out of incarceration?
So the answer, the short answer is yes. The kids who we get in these programs, I was looking at some of my numbers. We've gotten, I'd say, close to 80% off when we do the program.
Okay,
So
so
that's-
let me go start right there. 80% of how many? Like 40?
Over the last year,
Yeah, over the year.
I'd say out of 30 to 40.
Okay. And those are people, those are all young people who were sent home as a result of this process, not because they would have been sent home anyways because of the work of their public defender.
Well, it's hard to say whether they would have been sent home
Okay.
anyway. But I can tell you that the direct result is that they were released. And now whether they went home, that was a different story.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And is that for men and women?
That has been for girls and gender expansive youth because that's been going on longer. For boys and gender expansive youth, which is the structured release, we just started doing that, I think, in the summer. So the numbers are lower on that.
Lower, like?
What, you know, the number that you proposed to me. So we haven't been doing as many because we haven't been in action for as long.
Okay. I mean, this in November numbers was 3. Is that right?
Look, for me, I could tell you, I'm only focusing on what we've been doing. For this last list that we received, which it's not for the month of November, it was just for the last week, we had 10 that were proposed. I think 8 were released before we did, and then 2 others we had issues with that we could not participate in the structured release program.
So the 8 were part of the structured release program, had team meetings, and were then released?
No, they were released before we did the structured release.
Okay, so that's what I was trying to get at. So that is happening.
Yes,
And in that batch, it happened 80% of them.
correct.
Okay. Okay. That helps me. Okay, I have one other question that that actually has to do with the safe healing centers. So we're talking about piloting something in 2024. How many beds are we talking about for the pilot?
Yeah, we're still finalizing that, but based on some of the recommendations from some of the providers we've talked with, we're talking about pretty small. So likely under 10. The numbers that have been suggested are often more, closer to sort of like 4 to 6, 4 to 8. Which speaks to the need, obviously, that like if you do one demonstration project, it's a drop in the bucket, right? Like totally acknowledge that. Where I think our goal, we just got some CFCI funding for decarceration of girls and gender expansive youth. It came to Department of Youth Development. It's just shy of 4 million over 3 years, 4 million each year. And so I think that provides a real opportunity, as well as to engage with, philanthropic partners and to think about how to utilize some state funding as well to be able to get, our hope was to pilot 2 demonstration projects by mid-2024 for girls and gender expansive youth, and then to hopefully, start expanding soon after that. We know there's We know that's not enough. We just recognize it's sort of a complex new thing that we're trying to do with a lot of different legal partners. And so we want to make sure to do it right.
I'm sorry, yeah, of course.
I did have one more question, that,
Sure.
and I'm not sure who the right answer or person to answer is, maybe a couple of you. Did I hear that at one point probation officials made 40 phone calls to, or 40 different residential centers looking to place a young person and couldn't?
Actually, it was DCFS.
DCFS,
They
okay.
really looked at a number of placements for this young female, and those didn't work out. So they did end up finding another one, but it was, I guess, I wanted to say that, you know, they're looking at all of their resources and trying really hard. And that was when we got to the meeting, they had already done that. So it was still ongoing. And of course, CLC had, you know, recommendations for DCFS to consider, to look at some other funding options and then other places. And then it ended up where the young person was released from juvenile hall pending, I think she was pending competency. So that was great.
Okay, so I'm trying to wrap my head around the scope of the idea that there's not enough places to send these young women to. And so I'm wondering, I mean, are there 6 group homes that don't want to take them? Are there 40? I mean, 40 is a big number. So can I get somebody hopefully give me a sense of the scale of how many, let me rephrase this. So one of the things I heard from Luis was that there are places that won't take young women based on their charges. How many places are we talking about that are like that? And what percentage of them would have to change their intake requirements in order to, you know, really be able to move this program forward?
But I wouldn't be able to give you the exact number.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know every single provider in the county.
But are we
that's-
talking 6, dozens, 100?
I don't know. I wouldn't be.
You have no
Look,
idea. Okay. Okay.
If you give me enough time, I will provide you that. I just can't do it, you know, shoot from the hip. I'm not going to do that.
Just gonna talk loud, but appreciate it. You know, I do think that is where we are hoping to use some of our CFCI funding, is to just address, like, some of it I think is actual intake requirements, but a lot, like, I know we've heard from providers and the work group heard from providers that staff is overwhelmed, right? Like, staff wants training and supports. They don't feel ready to support these young people based on the seriousness of their mental health needs or their cases. And so that's where I think through, you know, the planning, we really sort of identified that, like, sometimes providers need better funding, additional funding, like the rates they're getting don't seem like they're really preparing them. Sometimes what they need is more training and supports, like, embedded. And so that's where we're trying to think, like, whether it's starting with a handful or dozens, right? But really trying to utilize some of that funding to tackle this from as many ways we can, and to invest in things that aren't safe healing centers, but that are on the continuum of just housemen and housing. I think there's some great community partners, like Young Women's Freedom Center comes to mind, others, you know, that have done housing work, and that we can sort of just keep investing. Because I do think we need, like, I think what I'm hearing a little bit of the question is, like, we have to tackle this from a lot of different angles, because 1 or 2 providers, 1 or 2 placements won't get us close to addressing this. And we're committed to supporting however we can in that way.
And look, to answer your question in the bigger scale of things, I think this is an area that we've identified now that's problematic. As we're going through this process, we're learning different things. So there is no black or white answer that I can give you to many of your questions. Rather, what this highlights is maybe we should have a group of folks who sit down with the providers, the current providers, like Michelle just said, what are your challenges? What are the needs of our youth? And what can we do? And if certain providers are not willing to change their requirements, then we have to expand that list. But again, I can't give you numbers. I just can't, because it's not an easy question to answer.
Just to say one last thing, we are actually going to be bringing providers together at the end of January, specifically to ask some of these questions, as well as reentry housing providers. And so to really hear from them what they need and to make sure it's informing the design of anything we do. So information that we get that's helpful to bring back to this body, we'd be happy to do.
And to us.
Of course, yeah,
Thank
this will
you.
be in partnership. We haven't
Great.
sent out an
Thank
invite
you.
yet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask those questions because it sounds like an opportunity to really push all of this forward in practical ways. So my mind is spinning, really thinking about like what would happen if we were to fix that problem. So thank you.
Commissioner Garcia-Leyes, if I could add, there was a conversation at one of our meetings a long time ago, maybe a year and a half ago or so. I think it was Ms. Cotton who gave the presentation to talk about the number of beds available. And they also, probation provided a pretty detailed list about how many beds are available for placements around the county, which I'm sure we could ask for an update for. It's something they have regularly available. What was said in the presentation is that it's not there isn't a lack of the number of beds. It's a lack of the correct placements. I've had the opportunity to sit on the work group for the Girls and Gender Expansive Youth Decarceration efforts. And an example is young women who are victims of human trafficking, CSEC, identified commercial sexual exploitation, because they have particular needs, and there are very few providers with those specialty services, similar to what Mr. Rodriguez said about the mental health issues. And often, bridges have been burned at the facilities, for lack of a better explanation, in both directions, where the young person won't go to a facility or the facility won't take the young person. But there have been some movements recently, including a recent board motion that around the idea of incorporating a no reject policy in the no reject, no eject, that's what they call it, in these facilities that are funded by the county. So in other words, as Mr. Rodriguez stated, like lowering the restrictions, changing the way that they make decisions about who they will and who they won't accept. So that's certainly something that the POC staff is interested in. I know DYD is looking closely into this, probation and DCFS. So it is an interesting kind of countywide question about how those providers make decisions about who they will accept and who they won't.
Commissioner Meredith? Commissioner Canales?
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation today. I'm wondering if you've heard of the Boys Republic, because I know that somebody that works closely with them said they do have beds available, but they don't get the referrals, especially from LA County, as often. And they also have girls placement in Pasadena that isn't really utilized as much as it could be. And so I'm just, thinking that that could be an option too. And then I was in one of the camps once and I met a youth, and he was turning 17. He had been in since he was 14 for possession of a gun. He explained to me his family wanted him home. And of course I was outraged. I was like, how are you keeping him? And then probation walked me through with the youth the address of the family. There was no such address. They did the home visits. They could not locate any family. Finally, after a while, with a lot of work, they found an uncle that did not do the classes, but they were willing to let him go and, do the classes in the meantime. So I've also seen, what happens when you're looking for that placement. As much as we want everybody immediately out and home, sometimes there is not that home because not everybody lives in Beverly Hills, right? Not everybody lives in Topanga Canyon. So sometimes there's not that option. But what I'm seeing is there's some incredible programs that I've actually brought up to my executive team. Incredible, amazing programs that are doing court support, alternatives to incarceration. They're looking at placements like with Boys Republic. They're looking at other alternatives if they can't get the youth home. They're collecting data, qualitative and quantitative, on the success rate. I know Pride and Truth, an amazing program. I'm hoping, maybe I'll make a motion at the end of this meeting, that we can have these groups and not the same ones, and look at how Young Women's Freedom Center, I'm a member of Sister Warriors. I absolutely support, but we cannot keep relying on one program being the end all be all. As massive as our incarceration system is, as massive as all these people that need resources and help. And because every organization has different agendas. Every organization has different, you must walk the way I walk and talk the way I talk, or you're not a member. And we're all different. We're all unique individuals, and we all need to be put with organizations where we belong and where we feel that we are getting the assistance needed. It's not just because I say, or you say, or, probation says. It has to be a real collective from community. And so I think wasn't really too many questions, but I'm just wanting to make sure that you have heard of Boys Republic, and that we could look at more organizations and hear from organizations that are really doing the work and expanding, the services available. Thank you.
Just briefly, because I know we're running or tight on time, but yes, Commissioner Canales, actually quite a few months ago, a number of us did a visit to Boys Republic for their SYTF facility. They have an SYTF facility now. And a couple of judges were there, DAs were there, members from our office, members from probation were there. And to your point, in fact, I was reviewing emails earlier, there's a continuing work effort by members of the court, probation, DA, the defender offices, DYD, to visit different providers, not only in LA County, but outside of LA County as well. So yes, I agree with you. The more, the better. So that's a continuing thing. But let me just leave it with this to Commissioner Garcia Lay's point, which is a valid point, is if all this good stuff is being talked about, why are the numbers still bad? Valid point. Valid point. But what I can tell you, I came into this position over juvenile maybe 5 years ago. The attitude of folks has changed 180. And by that, I mean the court, probation, the DA, other county departments, and really being committed to doing something. And which is get as many of these kids out, but not only get them out, but give them the proper services and support that they need. People are committed. The work is being done. Is it perfect? By no means. But that motivates me. And as a public defender, I can tell you that many times we're jaded and sarcastic in the way that we see things. But I'm inspired by the work that's being done. But that inspiration doesn't lead me to complacency. It leads me to let's do more and let's do better. So I just want to leave you with a positive message that we are committed. We're working together collaboratively. Partners that normally we weren't working together with. But we need to we still need to pressure point each other and see how we can do things. So thank you for bringing these points up. These are points that we're going to take back, but I can assure you we're committed. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. This is to the entire panel. There was an article yesterday from the LA Times. I thought it was very well written from Rebecca Ellis, reminding us in the county of the ongoing problem within our halls and camps. I'm looking at the description of this agenda meeting here about overcrowding and lowering the numbers. Can any one of you explain to this commission how you are taking this issue very seriously in assessing this problem and reducing the numbers and not preventing, I would say enhancing your decision-making, knowing what is going on the inside?
Just briefly, I can tell you, we have the support of our public defender in what we do with regards to the services that we provide for our youth. So I can only speak for myself, and it's not to denigrate or minimize anybody else's position. But speaking for my director, I can honestly tell you, he's committed. He's committed to doing the best that we can and providing as much resources. We're all strapped for resources, but our duty really is to defend that youth in whatever way, whether the kid is detained or not. That is our ultimate duty, and to pressure check everybody else, and we're doing that. Commissioner Carrillo, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So as Luis did say, we are very committed. Our chief joined us this year, and he is moving us forward. We are actually pouring, and I know people say about deployment and different things, you have to balance it all out, but we have all committed to supporting the facilities and doing our current jobs as well. So, we're giving as 100 and whatever percent, and we are all in. And so I can speak from that point. I know that we have various, on the continuum from staff, but we're always trying to support the best recommendation for the young person that's least restrictive, that mitigates any kind of out-of-home placement if at all possible. And up to, we have policy, and I don't know if we've mentioned this before, I think we have, that it comes to my level to clear certain recommendations because we want to make sure we consider every single thing, and then we ask additional questions before our staff submit these recommendations to the court. So we're going to continue to do that. We accept all feedback. We want to keep ourselves humble and walk forward. We want to be corrected and we want to do better, but we do care. And we care about our young people, whether they're on probation in the community or in our facilities. And so we've had multiple staff even volunteer for extra shifts on the weekends and holidays because we encourage that, and we do that weekly so that we can make sure that we're doing as much as we can, as best we can, and then we keep moving forward. And then, we know that you've given us various feedback. We've taken it to heart. We're trying to address everything, but we know that it's a group of things all at once. And so we appreciate the support and the feedback you've given us. And we just want to continue to move forward together. That's our new, our kind of summarizing what we're trying to do as a department. And we're going to just keep doing that. And so we thank you because we know that you've visited our facilities, you've talked to us, and we take notes and we take it back, and then we continue to see how we can improve data, how we can improve services. And basically with regards to the engagement and motivation, instead of just looking at a list of conditions or something like that, that's what we want to be about and we want to continue to do. So we very much appreciate this body and all of the bodies that have really, weighed in on how we need to move forward. And we do take it to heart, but we thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask some questions then. So I'm with Commissioner Garcia-Leyes, where I am also a little confused about these numbers. So you're saying, so there's this reference to 10 MDTs. In what time period are we talking about that? Oh, no, I'm sorry, these structured release. I don't know if they're conferences, meetings, I'm not sure how they're described. But what time period are you referring to where there were 10, I guess, scheduled or potential structured release meetings?
So this is about 2 weeks, well, actually about a week ago. The 10 were 10 of our clients whose names were given by probation saying, hey, these we could do structured releases on. And so what we do is we go back, we talk to our attorneys, find out exactly what's going on. So those were the 10 I'm referring to.
From 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
Okay. And how often do you get this list of, here are the eligible clients who are?
Every week, 2 weeks.
Okay. And so I guess in the last
And
few
that's
weeks.
just to our department.
Sure. We'll start with that. That's fine. So in the last, so you received this list of 10 clients 2 weeks ago. Did any of the meetings occur?
No.
No. Okay. And then 8 happened to be released on their own due to the advocacy of your attorneys or whatever happened in the courtroom.
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with then 2 weeks prior to that, if you can, are you able to tell me how many, or maybe it's Ms. Harada who can tell me how many of these meetings actually occurred in November total?
I wouldn't be able to.
That's like Ms. Harada.
I have groups. I'm sorry about the months. I don't have the clarity, but we had 6 meetings probably since September, October-ish. I'd have to look
So
at the
in
dates.
almost 4 months, there's only been 6 meetings.
Correct.
Okay. I guess with that.
We've been requested more, but by the time we get to the meeting, some youth are already released.
Right,
So then we
which makes me think then, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who feels this way, that the point is for this process to release more young folks. But if we're only holding 6 meetings of the, 285 young people who are currently incarcerated, it seems like this is not the thing that's going to release the pressure of all of these young people who are currently incarcerated. And if we're identifying young people who are being released because of advocacy in the courtroom, then it also feels like, before you even get to having these meetings, I'm not really understanding how effective this process is.
Well, I can tell you this. As the advocate for the youth. And we're the only advocate for that youth at the end of the day, legally, okay? Any resource that we have access to, we will take advantage. Whether it's one kid who's released in 2 months or 3 in a week, we will take advantage of that resource.
This is not directed at you, Mr. Rodriguez. I hear what you're saying, that you will take I was a public defender. I would take any resource that would allow my client to be free and not be surveilled and controlled by a system whose primary purpose is to do those things. But I'm talking about the fact that we have far too many young people incarcerated, and if this is not the thing that's going to release more of these young people, then we need to think about that. And I appreciate what you raised, Mr. Rodstrom, that one of the biggest issues is that clients are not able to see their attorneys, that experts are not able to see these young people to do evaluations, to do assessments. And so my question then is to the public defenders and to Mr. Rodstrom and Mr. Abrahamian, if he's still on the line, what is, is that a bigger issue? Is that what is keeping more and more of our young people incarcerated versus, these structured release meetings that, might release a handful of folks? But I'm just curious, like, what is the bigger need, Mr. Rodstrom, if you want to respond to that, if you feel like that's more of an issue or,
I think one thing to consider is just that the populations who are actually getting access to these meetings are a small percentage of who's actually detained.
Right.
And so I don't think we should look to this program as a success or failure based on the percentage compared to the total number of detained youth in LA County. I think we should be looking for how successful are these meetings among the youth that are actually going through them. And they've been very successful for those youth. It's complicated to then say, okay, well, we should just give every youth, immediate access because those are a different batch of cases. I will say I don't want to, I've already, sprung one thing on probation in this meeting, but I think, that seems to be my rule sometimes. So I think one thing that was effective for us was the client that Mr. Otis set up an MDT meeting for a client who did not fit this category. And it was successful for them. And this was someone with a 707B offense with, multiple petitions in the past. This was somebody who on paper was completely outside of this program. And they were able to find services for him. So that's a big ask and a big growth. But I guess what I see from these programs is that they are, in the title, they're a pilot. And that pilot has been successful and functional as a prospective system by which maybe we start to look at how we work on the rest of the youth who are detained. And that's a much bigger population. But, fundamentally, if I want to say the total number of detained youth in LA County is like 360.
It's 500.
500, okay. And so if essentially 40 youth were released through these meetings, if it's 100% success rate and it's close to that, it's still only 10% of the total population. So, looking then at, well, this is not making a giant dent, but among the group that actually participated, it really did.
I guess that's the part that's not clear to me. If, for example, 8 young people who, were eligible for these meetings were released anyway. So I guess that's the part that I'm struggling with. But I appreciate your point that, what does it look like to expand something like this for young people who might not fall within, these lower level offenses or whatever's been outlined, and to make this opportunity available for them.
Yeah.
And if that's something that,
So, something that's occurred to me, and I don't know how practical it would be, I think it would take a lot of discussion, but attorneys and maybe a manager to help clear it know when they have a case that credibly could do well on release, even when it's outside of this particular listed population. And they, the public defender's office, where I've come from, and the alternate public defender's office, all of us have relations with our clients, and we know when we have someone who does not fit the list, but really could do well on release. And it's something that I think probation, has shown some willingness to participate in. I don't want to try and promise that suddenly we can put every case through and guarantee that they would be out, but some flexibility has been shown and it's been successful. The fact that there's a number of youth who are in, despite the fact that a number of youth were released, there are constant new cases coming in.
I do just, I know not last week, excuse me, last month, there was an attorney from the Public Defender's Office who also called in and lifted up the lengthy attorney wait time to see their clients. And I think maybe Mr. Sanders will present on something related to that shortly. So I didn't want to just let that drop and not follow it up. But I just, again, it was mentioned last month. I think it's been mentioned. We've had public comment from families who've raised it, that their attorneys have had difficulty accessing young people, or that their children's attorneys have had difficulty accessing them. You've raised it today, so it does feel like an ongoing issue that we should explore. I had another question. This is for Ms. Newell. Just as related to the YES teams and like diversion partners and the roles that they play in these meetings, or if they play a role in these meetings.
In like the structured release meetings?
Yes. Or the transit, I don't know if the transition MDTs are still happening or if
Yeah,
they're part of those.
I mean, there are some MDTs that are held in facilities that like our credible messenger partners are invited to participate in. So
Can you talk into the mic so that our WebEx folks can hear you?
Sometimes when we have an organization that works closely with that young person, they are invited into MDTs and really know a lot about the young person, can advocate for them. But generally for these structured release meetings, it's just DYD staff that are invited. What we try to do is just figure out, are there diversion partners that would be able to receive a young person, connect with them? We connect with them directly. We connect them to the attorney. They don't come to the meetings directly. I think we're open to however we can get more people advocating for these young people. In terms of like generally like the concept of like the YES team and the collaborative decision making, it's definitely something that as we look at any alternative placements, I think is going to need to be a really important part. I don't think that it's existing quite like that in this process right now.
Okay. And then just one last question. I imagine that there are young folks who are on diversion who end up picking up a case. And so are those folks at all, like who have a relationship with the young person? So not just like prospective diversion providers, but are diversion providers who already have a relationship with the young person, who might know them in a different way, have cultivated a different relationship with them, either invited to or allowed to participate either in the structured release meetings or in the transition MDTs.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think I think this is an opportunity where there is a lot of potential for overlap just between even within DYD, right? Like sort of the diversion work and even some of like we're going to have a whole bunch of youth development providers coming on in the next couple of months too, a lot throughout the county. And that's going to be an amazing opportunity as well. Typically right now, we learn about one of these meetings 24 to 48 hours in advance. It's not a lot of time to like cross-reference, is this youth possibly being served by anyone else at DYD? But I think it's something we can start trying to do as we learn about cases, just to see, is there any possibility we already have any relationship with this young person or that our current providers do? But the more time we have to sort of help connect the dots, long-term as we refine this process, probably the better.
Yes, Commissioner Mundo.
I was part of the YES team work groups a couple of years back. Are they in play now? Is there a YES team concept out there?
There's going to be a piloting at a school, but I want to be cognizant that I'm like not the YES team collaborative decision-making team, like point person at all at DYD. So I think it overlaps with so many different things, like happy to make sure to connect any interested members to the right folks at DYD to share more information. Because I think there are still existing work group conversations and planning around. And then there's going to be, my understanding is again, there's going to be a piloting at a high school.
Okay, but currently there's no YES team out there.
I don't think that it currently exists. I think we're just trying to make sure that like the principles of YES team, which is like really centering family and young person and who their community is and having collaborative decision-making, like we're trying to incorporate that in much of what we do, but I don't think there's anything that has like a YES team label.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm gonna move us along to agenda item number 4. Thank you to our presenters and panelists from agenda item number 3 for being here. Agenda item number 4 is on the agenda for us to do 2 things. First, we're going to approve the calendar and reaffirm the meeting frequency of the POC. And then we will accept nominations from commissioners for the positions of chair, vice chair, and secretary of the POC. We will not be voting on officers today. That will happen in January at our annual meeting. You can see the link to the calendar, the agenda, and commissioners, you have it in front of you. We're planning to stick with the second Thursday of the month from 9 to 1. Do you have any concerns or regular conflicts with that time? If not, can someone, or with those dates as well? And if not, can someone please make a motion to accept the 2024 calendar? Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Garcia-Lays, seconded by Commissioner Mundo. Wendy, let's take public comment, if any, on this motion, and then proceed to a vote.
Is there any public comment from anyone in the room about the 2024 calendar or online? If you'd like to use the little raise your hand function. Nope, no comments.
And then shall we proceed to a vote?
Yes, sorry. We pass the microphone back and forth. Okay, I'm going to call the roll. We are voting to accept the 2024 calendar as presented and maintain the same time schedule. Please vote yes, no, or abstain. Commissioner Canales? Commissioner Carrillo? Commissioner Garcia-Lays? Commissioner Meredith? Commissioner Mundo? Commissioner Terry? And Chair Kokani. So with Commissioners Jackson and Lewis absent, the motion passes unanimously.
Next, we'll be accepting nominations for the positions of chair, vice chair, and secretary of the POC for the 2024 calendar year, with elections to be held in January. Commissioners, do you have nominations, or would you like to nominate yourself for any position? Please note that you may nominate yourself for more than one position. Commissioner Garcia-Lays? Okay. Do I need to do anything else? Just make it. Okay. Yes.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Mundo for chair.
Okay.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Canales for vice chair.
All right. Any other nominations? Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Terry for secretary as well.
Okay. And are folks, any other nominations? And are folks accepting those nominations? Okay. Oh, and do we have any written or live public comments for item number 3? All right, thank you. We have our nominations, and this will be on the agenda in January. Agenda item number 5 is regarding the Probation Department's progress on reaching compliance for areas of non-compliance with Title 15 and 24, according to recent California Board of State and Community Corrections inspections, and the progress of implementing the corrective action plans. We are pleased to have Bureau Chief Scott Sanders and Valerie Van Kirk here to discuss the issue.
Sorry, for those of you who are watching virtually, we're getting set at the table here. If you can give us just a moment, we're going to check batteries on the mics.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. I am Scott Sanders, and My partner here, Valerie Van Kirk.
Valerie Van Kirk, RTSB Camps and Dorothy Kirby Center, Bureau Chief.
So between the two of us, we have oversight of all of the institutions in LA County. And before we start our presentation on BSCC, I do want to mention that I want to follow up on what was talked about wait times. So this is good news that we mentioned that the pods will actually be installed on the 18th. And we know that that will cut down on some of the wait times. We're looking at different spaces. So we've identified different spaces to have interviews for attorneys, competency issues, so to cut down on the wait time. So it is important, and it is something that's on our radar. The administration at LP has looked at that. And like, again, I said, on the 18th, those pods will be installed. So we'll be able to report back how that's going the next meeting to cut down on these wait times. And also the attorneys we've also put in place where we have somebody, if there's to cut down on the wait times, that somebody's responsible to make sure that they notify somebody. So it's not just somebody sitting in the lobby and an attorney is waiting. There's a name and a person who's responsible to do those things. So we'll follow up on that to make sure that happens. Okay?
So that means you'll get back to us.
Yes, that means I'll get back to you. Once it's actually installed, I'll be able to give you a progress report. So the next meeting, it should be a different discussion. We should be able to say, hey, this happened, and this is what we're looking at. That's the plan. So I will start with the caps. So for both Barry J and Los Padrinos, and the caps are very similar. For Barry J and the last completion date on any of those is January 5th for Barry J, January 10th for LP. So I will say this, I'll start out with this to say that we have made tremendous progress in a short amount of time. We put a lot of measures in place, and I'll go through each of the areas, but I will say this, I'll give you the process. So our Systems Accountability Bureau has created a tracking log for every single item, for every person who's responsible for those items. We've been meeting regularly more than twice a week. We have work groups that are working on certain things, and many of the items are already in the completion state. They're already completed, and the rest of them are still ongoing. So I'll go through them one by one. So I'll give you the section from BSCC. So the regulation 1321 is staffing. And kind of goes without saying, is to maintain the proper staffing so that youth are provided with education opportunities, programming, and safety, and that goes for staff and for the youth. We've created a sign-in, sign-out system that really keeps an accurate check of who's on grounds and when they arrive there.
So is this LP? Or?
That's for both.
Oh, for
So if there's one that's just for one, I'll make sure I tell you this. Right now, they're generally the same. So this goes for both facilities, and staffing levels are to be at 1 to 8. We are in excess of 1 to 8. Today, we're more like at 1 to 5. And we've done a staffing analysis to ensure, okay. Now, don't start. Okay. I don't remember where I was. Oh, the staffing analysis. So we know exactly what number of staff we need for each shift to make sure that we staff to those numbers. So that in that section for staffing, that's generally completed. There's a couple of little areas that we need to still follow up on that's ongoing. Section 1322 with youth supervision and staff orientation and training, which is really to give it the short, is a site-specific training that we had to provide for all the staff who provide supervision to all of our youth. That training was developed late last week, and they're actually rolling that out right now for both of the sites to be completed at the end of the month. Again, by the 5th for Barry J and the 10th for Los Padrinos, and we're confident that we're going to meet that deadline. 1324 policy and procedure manuals, which is huge. That's for both sites. So we had to not only, well, for LP, we had to update the policy manual for detention services. Barry J has actually create and update because it's a new bureau. So we had to make it site specific. It had to be SYTF specific. So our management team, along with people that they designated, is working with our policy unit, but we also had to do a evacuation plan. In the event we have to evacuate a whole facility, there had to be a specific place where they would go. So Valerie's group actually helped us because some of our kids will be going to some of her places, and that's already been done. We have one minor thing that we need to finish to follow up on, and other than that will be met. 1328, which is safety checks, that's both sites. So we have I'm sure you guys know that we have the electronic system now for safety checks and monitoring that safety checks are done when they're supposed to be done and randomly within the 15-minute period. So we've monitored that, and that's completed. That's one that we've marked completed. We have daily audits by the supervisors and the management, and we set up a process where you have an alert comes before the check is due. So we're looking at those every day, every shift to make sure that that's being monitored. So that's a check. We have the color blue on our own internal thing is blue is completed. 1354, which is room confinement, that's more of an LP thing, but it also could be a Barry J issue. Staff have already been trained about the procedures. If a youth is in room confinement, what documentation needs to be present. So leadership is reviewing CCTV cameras to ensure that the documentation is matching. If a youth is in the room, there needs to be some documentation, why he was in the room and when he came out. So the quality assurance piece of that is being monitored daily and on every shift to make sure that what we see on the camera is what the documentation says. 1358, use of restraint devices and transport. That's already met. We just needed to make sure that the documentation matches. If there's we had to use mechanical restraints on a youth to move them from point A to point B, that the documentation was present and that it was accurate. Use of force training, which is 1357. Another huge undertaking for both sites. Any youth supervision staff had to complete the SCM, the use of force policy training and the physical portion. Barry J is finished. LP is on track to be finished with that training, hopefully by the end of the month, but for sure before the deadline of the cap. 1370, ongoing for both sites. Education, this also happens to be a DOJ, it covers both areas to ensure that youth are delivered to school, are taken to school, not only regularly, but on time. So what we've done is we've matched our tracking logs. The facilities will be using the same tracking log and making sure that we take roll to ensure that Scott is in school at the prescribed time. If I'm supposed to be there at 8:30, we need to make sure that he's there at 8:30. And if not, there needs to be some documentation explaining why, so that is being tracked every day. Also, the attendance record also. It's not good enough for me just to show up and then leave school and 5 minutes later, I need to be at the school. And if there's a reason why I had to leave, if I had to go to medical, if I got sick, if there was an incident, that needs to be documented so we can, and that's all captured in a spreadsheet that everybody can see. And we reconcile with LACO also on the attendance to make sure we're reporting out numbers the same. 1390 is discipline, but it doesn't really necessarily mean discipline. That's more about of our behavior management program. So we had training with the new BMP program. LP did theirs first. That's already been rolled out. Barry J's is being completed as we speak. We did a new handbook because remember, Barry J had to have everything SYTF specific. So we couldn't use the same. Much of the information is the same, but some things are separate. The staging and different things, because it is SYTF, is a little different. So that handbook has been completed. The training for that is a short training period, but that'll be rolled out. Every young person at both CVK and Barry J and the girls at DKC will receive that orientation to that new handbook. I skipped program, 1371. So programming was also another huge one, and that's for both sites, for youth to be able to receive programming that's age-specific and specific to what they wanted. To ensure that the programming is happening, it's one thing to say it's happening, it's another thing to actually observe it's happening. So we've created new program activity logs for both sites to make sure that if the calendar says that we'll be doing program B at 4 o'clock, when Wendy goes to see that program B should be happening at 4 o'clock, it should match that calendar. We know that there's been some issues with that. I'm not saying that program was not happening, but it didn't necessarily always match. So those are what we have to be able to prove. That's our proof of practice. That's actually happening. And in conjunction with that, I mentioned before when I was here that we did lots of surveys with youth to find out what kind of programs they wanted to see. So, and since the last time I was here, Barry J and LP have onboarded lots of new programs, and there's several that are in the contract finalization in like writing programs. Music, there's going to be a music program at for sure, Barry J. We're looking at one for LP, and there's one coming at CVK. And those will be hopefully starting beginning in January. The kids want those kind of things. So we try to do those programs that they'll be interested in so that we'll have some good outcomes that they'll want to go to. Also, leadership, surprisingly, was one of the things that they want to see, mentoring and leadership. So we've contracted with some folks that will be doing and providing those things. I went through all of them. So of course, I'm sure there will be questions, but we are very confident that we'll meet this cap. Again, there was a meeting on the way here this morning. So we're looking at every day, okay, this is supposed to be done. Did we make sure this is done? And then after we've checked it off that yes, it's done, it's not good enough just to do a checkbox. We also have to have the proof of practice that this is actually happening. And as we train our staff, that this is what we do. So that is my portion.
Well, I'm not going to report any non-compliance. Camp after the ball was 100.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Sorry, I moved it away. I do not have any non-compliance to report at this time. Camp after ball was inspected the inspection was completed on 10/6. There were 0 areas of non-compliance for the second year in a row. Camp Page, the inspection was completed on October 10th. Although there were 3 areas at the time of non-compliance, those areas were cleared and we are now compliant at that facility. Those areas were cleared on November 1st. And we provided proof of practice. We began immediate corrective action and demonstrated that everything has been fixed through proof of practice. We're currently in the middle of inspections at Dorothy Kirby Center and Camp Scott. And Rocky, we're scheduled for a debrief soon, next week probably.
Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments for item number 4?
Yes, we do have a written public comment that was received and sent out to all the commissioners and will be attached to the agenda. Is there any additional written public comment, Janae, on this topic? Okay, so if we have anyone in the audience who'd like to comment in person on this topic, please approach the podium. And if you'd like to make a comment and you're participating virtually, please use the raise your hand icon or dial *3 if you're dialing in. Ismail, do we have anyone on the list? We have 2 public commenters. Oh. Bernadette is the first public commenter. We're going to unmute you and you'll need to unmute yourself and we'll give you 2 minutes to give your public comment. Bernadette, can you hear us? I think you're unmuted, Bernadette, if you can begin speaking. We can't hear you. Let's go to the next commenter and we'll come back to you, Bernadette. Next commenter is Adrina.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. You can begin.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make a quick comment for non-compliance. It kind of concerns me just based off personal experiences that, due to the nature of the environment, the lack of compliance, probation, they write up kids and it affects their court date. I could understand if they have programs in place, if they're following what they're supposed to do, if the kids are getting outdoor times and then they're still giving them a hard time, then that would be cool to write up. But the fact is it's a toxic environment that they created, and it's not the kids' fault. So now they don't have programs, proper education services, outside time, and they can't even identify each kid's disability either. And that's what causes a lot of the tension and the problems in there. And then the blame gets placed on the kids for their frustration, you know um, and I just don't think it's fair, in my opinion, to write of kids when they're failing at their job by not having programs in place. So in a sense, maybe we need to start writing up probation instead of it being vice versa. Get the programs in order, get in compliance before you write up the kids and affect their court cases to keep them in jail long, to make it seem as if the kids are dysfunctional, when in fact it is the place itself that's dysfunctional, not the kids. And that was just my public comment just for non-compliance and write-ups. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Bernadette. Bernadette, if you can unmute yourself, we'll begin your time. You're unmuted on our system, so you may need to unmute yourself. And if you're not able to speak, we'd welcome your written public comment. You can email it to info@poc.lacounty.gov. Anybody else in the queue? Lena Mallet, we're going to unmute you and you can begin.
Thank you. First, just want to note that Los Padrinos and Barry J. Nadeau were found out of compliance for shocking practical failures. We know all of the horrific kinds of conditions that youth are living in. They don't have access to programs. Their education looks like packets that are developed for kids in elementary school. Youth are passing reading exams without actually being able to read. Not having access to visits with their family, their attorneys. These are issues of culture and practice. To me, all of the remedies that have been proposed are around the proof of practice issue. But it's important to capture what is happening, but I think it's largely missing the cultural and practical issue at hand, which is probation's failure to care for youth under their supervision. So hope we can address that a little bit more as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Anyone, do we already do folks in the room?
Nobody came up.
Okay. Okay. All right, commissioners, do you have questions or comments? Commissioner Mundo? Commissioner Terry? No? Commissioner Garcia-Lays?
So I am optimistic that creating the manuals, getting the safety checks done, that those are well within the department's areas of competency and is taken seriously. And I'm hopeful those things are going to happen. Although I am also mindful that at Central, when it came time to check the closed caption TV to the records, everything seemed to have fallen apart. Was that about a year ago? So I know things can still happen. But at our last meeting, we specifically requested what you're describing as tracking logs and program activity logs and proof of practice. And we haven't gotten any of that. Chair Kakani said we didn't even get replies to our last emails requesting them. And I, along with the previous caller, am very concerned that on the serious matters involving staffing, what we're seeing is a paper compliance that's trying to hide what's really happening. So for the public, I have to admit I have not been to the facilities lately, but in my experience, you walk into Los Padrinos and there's a crowd of staff at the entrance, and you head out onto the campus and there's lots of staff walking around, and you'll see that there's lots of staff in the security checkpoints, and that many of these are staff who've been transferred to Los Padrinos on a day basis. And then you get into the units and the staff is not 7-to-1 or 8-to-1. It's 12 or 15-to-1. And that's the staff that I think matters most. When you go into a room and you see one DSO like in his corner with his back to the wall and the kids just wilding out because there's nobody to stop them, it does not matter how many staff are walking around the campus and ensuring the movement happens if they don't go into the unit to help with the movement. So those are the sorts of proof of practice that we were hoping to see and we haven't seen. My experience as a lawyer tells me when you ask for discovery documents and you don't get it, you're supposed to infer that those things are incriminating, and it's not a good sign. So with that in mind, can you explain to us in more detail what the tracking logs look like? Will we see them? Will we get an opportunity ourselves to go look to see whether or not what we're seeing is rectifying the problems, or are we seeing paper compliance? And one other thing is the staffing issue, the way the BSCC has discussed it, it's not do you have 8-to-1? It's do you have enough staff to meet basic things? And the example they've come up with again and again is, are youth urinating in their rooms because there's not enough staff to let them out at night? You could have 8-to-1, but if that's happening, you're still not compliant. So can you give us some details about that?
Yes, absolutely. So some of the proof of practice, some of the documents are new. So we're developing, because what we wanted to have is the same document. Though they're two different facilities, some of the operations are exactly the same. So I wanted whoever audits to be able to see the same tracking log for programming, same tracking log for education for both sites, so they match. So that could be, I'm not going to say why we didn't send anything, and then I'll own whatever I need to own, but moving forward, that's what those will look like. I am very confident that I can say that what we probably saw a month and a half ago, we were not seeing those same things now. We've streamlined how people are actually going into units. So the management team is meeting, they're probably in meeting overload to look at the things that are really important. We know if there's behavior issues, if Valerie's creating a behavior, I'll use her as my example, a behavior issue, that means I can't get my programming. So we understand those type of things. So going back to some of those basic training things, we've talked about this forever, about back to basics, some trainings. We're doing some of those things right now. We have I'm really confident with the management team, the supervisors at both sites, that they're looking at this at a on the ground level. A lot of times we look at things and we're in a room, with a nice mahogany desk, and we say, oh, so these things should happen. You need to have people who know how to make those things happen. So I'm really confident that we have that group of people there. So are things moving as quickly as I would like them to move? No, but are they moving with intentionality? Yes, I would say yes. And I wouldn't sit here and say that I'm confident if I was not. So I do. Again, I apologize if whatever documents were requested didn't get there, but most of the proof of practice, at least for this, everything that I just mentioned now, these are brand new proof of practice documents. We want to make sure that it captures everything. So when the auditor comes, she can see that Scott went to programming on this day from this time to this time, and this is who provided the programming. It wasn't that detailed before, so we want it to be that detailed so we can eliminate the questions on the front end.
Do we have a timeline for the audits that we're talking, the inspections? I mean, are we taking like 2 weeks?
So we're expecting the re-inspection sometime in January. We don't have an exact date just yet.
Commissioner Meredith?
This is more of a comment than a question. I was at Silmar on Friday with Supervisor Hahn and her staff, and we went and saw I forget the name of the program, the dog program.
Pause for life.
Pause for Life. Then the two young men that I was dealing with were very impressed with that program and how they were very involved with it. One of them I was talking to, he has 3 years to go. He's graduated, and his thing is that when he gets out, he would like to be an electrician. And that started the whole conversation with supervisor's team and myself about maybe somehow trying to find some kind of programming to look at occupational training, for lack of a better term, for those that are going to be here another 2 or 3 years, how we work that. So, but overall, that program was a success. The youth I talked to were extremely happy out there. And I just wanted to point out the occupational training.
So speaking of occupational training, so we met yesterday just about those kind of things, different types of vocational training. So some of those are coming. We're meeting right now with kids. Another thing that they wanted was barbering school, not so they can get haircuts, so they can learn how to do it. So part of the trade, not only just teaching them how to cut, but understanding all the things that go into it. So we're working with that so we can roll that out for all of the sites. And that's coming to a place near you real soon. Well, maybe not you.
Commissioner Canales? No. I just wanted to lift up the public comment that we received, especially as it related to the education components or compliance. And so I'm just going to read this part because it feels particularly disturbing and I didn't really hear an accounting for it. So LACO reported that in August alone, and I understand that the period that we're talking about is post-August. I think the inspection was like in October, or the corrective action plans were submitted in October, but either way, I imagine this remains an issue, and based on my visits to LP at least, it's very clear that a number of kids are not getting, forget quality education, but any education. And so, again, I'm just going to read this. LACO reported that in August alone, Los Padrinos had a total of 155,900 minutes of lost instructional time and an attendance rate of about 89%. Barry J. Nydorf had a total of 43,250 minutes of lost instructional time and an attendance rate of 73.6%. As a result, for the month of August, 26 students were owed 119 hours of compensatory education at Barry J. Nydorf, and 137 students were owed 341 hours at Los Padrinos by probation. LACO also reported, compensatory hours owed by probation for the months of January, April, and May. This means that according to LACO's reports, over 2,000 compensatory hours are owed to young people receiving their education in the juvenile halls. So I didn't hear anything in your corrective action plan, maybe I missed it, talking about compensatory hours and how you envision those being provided, what the plan is, given that at least, I can't remember when we were at LP, if it was August or September, but it was very clear that young people were still missing instructional time. So the idea of receiving compensatory education felt like it was a far off thing. So just if you could speak to that.
Sure. So one of the things in some of the proof of practice things that we're doing is actually taking roles. So we have people who are assigned to the school, probation people, who work with LACO to ensure that I'm in school on time, which goes to the hours and what is happening in the classroom, and taking the role. So I can tell you for sure that it does not look like that now. Yesterday, I get that report every day. So we're looking at those reports to see. So whenever we start seeing a trend that kids are getting to school late, kids are not going to school, we know that that's a red flag. So those are the things that we're looking at right now. So not only do we keep our own records and our own role, but we also reconcile with LACO, because sometimes there can be, we might report something one way and they see it a different way. Say not only sometimes we might be late because of whatever happened. There might be a reason that why we were late to school, but it also could be a reason, a situation where a teacher might not be there on time. And then, but what happens, it goes on, is listed as a late, which means it'll be less education time. So that's why we've stationed somebody, and that happens at both sites. So we're looking at that, regular meetings with that. So that's part of the weekly meeting also that they have at both sites, the agency meeting where all the agencies are around to discuss any issues, any trends. I know that at both sites, Ms. Novak and Ms. Roman for LP have a policy where they're really open door and actually walking and seeing the site. So they know what's happening in real time. So again, I mentioned a few minutes ago that the team that I think that is in place, that this is really important to them. And I can tell you that education is part of, when you look at staffing, so when staffing was mentioned as an issue, so many other things fall under staffing. So school falls under staff, education falls under staffing, programming falls under staffing. So fixing staffing and looking at that also addresses some of the other things. So I'm sorry if I didn't mention anything about the education when I was doing the presentation.
I mean, you mentioned some of that, but I guess what I'm hearing you saying is a like forward-looking plan.
No, now.
But I guess, okay, or even a current plan, but it's not clear to me how, like, what is the plan for providing the compensatory hours that are owed to young people? Ms. Van Kirk, I think might have an answer to that.
I can probably speak to that. We have an education services manager who could probably provide more information to us on that, but compensatory services is also part of the DOJ settlement agreement. And last I spoke to the education services manager, that the youth were receiving compensatory hours, but we could follow up on that and get more information.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be great, that if there could be some sharing of, I mean, also some of the stuff that you shared, Mr. Sanders, about, you know, how you're tracking this information, I think based on what Mr. Garcia Lays was asking for, but also, I mean, that's a lot of compensatory hours. And so, you know, based on the story that Mr. Luis Rodriguez shared about, you know, a young person being detained because he was 30 minutes late to school every day, presumably the judge's intent was to ensure that this young person didn't miss any school. And so if we're just replicating what's happening in the community, then it seems to me that, I mean, generally, incarceration doesn't seem like it's ever the answer to me, but if that's what you're trying to remedy by someone being incarcerated, but we're only further exacerbating the problem, then that feels wildly concerning to me. So I guess if there is documentation, if there are these logs, and any sort of plan to specifically provide the compensatory hours, I think that would be much appreciated. And again, I assume that should be able to be shared quickly because it sounds like you're going to be having an inspection in January or a re-inspection. So I imagine that you're going to be, I don't know, coming up with this documentation or providing this documentation. Are there any other follow-up questions from the commissioners? If not, I think we can wrap up this agenda item. Thank you, Ms. Van Kirk. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. And I think we can, gosh, we're like killing it on time. I'm going to motion to recess for 10 minutes. Do I need a second or anything like that?
Second.
Okay, all right. So, okay, we're gonna just take a 10-minute break then, and we'll see you all at 11:44. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for joining us after our break. We're going to move to agenda item number 7, which is to discuss and take appropriate action on updates from the POC's executive director. Wendy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I am looking forward to giving you some brief information that you will be getting more information about in the weeks and months to come, in particular around the reports that I discussed in the first agenda item today. So we are continuing to work collaboratively with probation and looking forward to extending that collaborative work to the other partners involved in the intake process, as Commissioner Mundo was elaborating on earlier, and to being able to share publicly that information and reports. We're really thankful to the POC staff team led by Donisha Smith and John Hunter for their work in the evaluation of the data, and looking forward to sharing that with our partners. There are other folks in the community who are also reviewing and interested in this data, in particular as it pertains to girls' decarceration and some of the Youth Justice Reimagined goals. So we're happy to be able to continue that work. Second, I'd like to say that the most recent quarterly update on OC spray, pepper spray phase out, indicated that the department was working with their Department of Justice monitor to develop a phase out plan, and that phase out plan was supposed to be completed by the end of November. I requested a copy of the plan, and there's been no response to my request. So I'm not sure whether the plan has been created or if it's in process. I will say, for context, the original motion to eliminate OC spray was in 2019, and the original phase-out plan created by probation themselves, which was, I will say, a very extensive and thoughtful phase-out plan, was implemented shortly thereafter. Then there was an updated phase-out plan that indicated that all units at both Barry J and Los Padrinos, or it was then Central, but now Los Padrinos, would be phased out by January of 2024. You will see in the OC spray reports that the Barry J. Nydorf, the SYTF facility, has effectively phased out OC spray, even though that has not been part of a specific plan. The deployments reports have shown no deployments since July 18th, the date that the youth were moved out of Barry J and into Los Padrinos. However, that is sort of the opposite of the story at Los Padrinos, in which OC spray was reissued on after an incident in July, as I mentioned at the last meeting. So the phase-out plan actually only applies at this point to Los Padrinos. Of course, it makes sense to also incorporate Barry J. Nydorf in the phase-out plan, since the staff there still have access to OC spray, but I really want to extend my continued congratulations to the staff at finding ways to use alternative methods to address issues there besides the OC spray. It's very impressive for the staff to do that of their own accord, and it's something that I appreciate. So then I wanted to talk briefly about our inspections reports, which are attached to the agenda. Similar to my giving the presentation earlier today, this is a presentation that you should be hearing from Dr. Gongora, so I'm going to be very brief about it, mostly because we are going to have a robust town hall in January where we will be inviting probation, the directors of the facilities, and community-based organizations to discuss the outcomes and recommendations and findings in the inspections, and where Sarah can go through them in detail and answer your questions. But they're due to the BSCC on December 31st, and they have all been submitted to the Board of Supervisors already. So I just wanted to give you some brief highlights since they are publicly available, and hope that you and members of the public will read them. I think that it's fair to say that there is a distinct variations among the inspections, including a number of very positive things that we found, positive things that were positive before, and positive things that were not positive before. And then also some remarkable challenges, some of which have already been discussed today. What is interesting to me, and we've discussed as a part of the staff of the Probation Oversight Commission, is the overlap of some of the work that we're doing. And while we're discussing, for example, the demographics of the youth who are incarcerated, in addition to racial disparities, there's some other demographics that came out during the inspections process that I find particularly interesting. Department of Children and Family Services, what percentage already been a part of an acknowledged case around neglect, abuse, or abandonment. The other statistic that came up at Los Padrinos, we were speaking with the leadership of LACO there and learned that, so the high school at Los Padrinos it's a pretty big school, 250 students or so. And of that, about 40% of those youth have individual education plans, IEPs, receiving special education services. I asked Dr. Anderson from LACO, who was giving us the tour that day and providing us with that information, what the rate is in a general community public school, and he said he would expect it to be about 12%. So in thinking about who we are incarcerating, I think it's also important to think about their tremendous educational needs. I think Chair Kakani mentioned that in the some of those compensatory requirements relate to those individual education plans, but also specialized services that youth need and what they need in their classrooms. So the inspections process was enlightening, and I'm so thankful to Dr. Gongora and Jennifer Ochoa Garcia for leading the process, and really mostly to you all, the commissioners. These are day-long inspections. They're intense, and there are lots of questions to ask. There are lots of interviews to have, and lots of people to talk to, staff from probation as well as all the partner agencies, and most importantly, discussions with the youth. And the way you all engage with the young people and with the staff, I just think shows the highest levels of respect and seriousness about the value of what you're contributing here. So for the public, I will say that we were instructed very clearly by the BSCC that our role as the Probation Oversight Commission in conducting these inspections, which we're required to do, is to go into the facilities as lay people and think about what would it feel like for our children to be in these facilities? What would it feel like for us to be in these facilities? And provide a more contextualized inspection than what the BSCC conducts, which is very strictly looking at Title 15 and Title 24 in direct compliance. And I think that when you read the inspections, you'll find that the commissioners did exactly that. So I'll just go through some of the strong positives and the concerning challenges and then invite you to attend. I should have written this down, but I think the town hall is January 4th. Is that right? January 4th. So we'll be sending out a link to these inspections and a save the date, but we hope you'll join us virtually for that meeting. And so some of the very strong positives in particular, are strides that we saw at Barry J. Nydorf. This is now my third inspection attended at Barry J. Nydorf, and the improvements are remarkable. I will say it's helpful to only have, I think there were 60 or so youth there on the day we were there, 50, just over 50 now. That makes a big difference. It's something Chief Iarrosa has mentioned as one of his goals for the department is to have facilities with smaller populations. And I think you can see at Barry J that some of the strides are related to staff, staffing being appropriate, staffing being consistent, youth interacting and knowing with the staff. It's something that Bureau Chief Sanders mentioned is very true, in that when we were walking around Barry J with Ms. Novak, the superintendent there, the youth kind of swarm her when she comes into the units because they know her and they think she can solve their issues. And I say that absolutely as a compliment because she is clearly regularly in the units as well as the other staff that were escorting us, which I think makes a big difference. So we saw improvements in terms of tone, improvements, as I mentioned, in terms of OC spray and using de-escalation techniques, and just overall strides towards the goals of the facility. I would say the overall approach, youth development issues that were evident at Camp Rocky and Campus Kilpatrick are highlighted in the inspections. The experience at Camp Rocky is a very interesting one. I told one young man there that I was going to share a quote that he told me because I sat with him in the cafeteria during lunch in a really private opportunity for conversation. I said, is there anything that you'd like for me to share in terms of our inspections reports about your concerns? And he said in a very loud voice, yes, I'm very concerned that I'm going to embarrass DPO so-and-so at basketball this afternoon. And I told him I was going to put that in the inspection. We didn't, but I am sharing it because I think that demonstrates precisely the level of rapport and therapeutic environment that we're hoping for in the department, and would love to see the department utilize some of the skills and techniques that have been incorporated at Camp Rocky, at Campus Kilpatrick, and more recently at Barry J. Nydorf into some of the facilities where there have been more challenges. I also think that in terms of the challenges, some of them are very similar to what we've seen in inspection reports before in board motions in these meetings. In particular, and I know we start to sound like a broken record, but it can't be emphasized enough, the access to programming. You've heard Commissioner Meredith say on multiple occasions in his visits, and also other commissioners who've reflected this, that kids are sitting around. That was particularly evident at Los Padrinos, and even more particularly evident in the units where there are older youth. So we spent quite a bit of time in one of the units where most of the young people are high school graduates, so they're not allowed to participate in LACO's K-12 education programs, and rely on probation education services to help bring laptops or allow them to access college education classes, which happens, in my opinion and in the findings of the commissioners, too infrequently. So there's just a lot of downtime, which leads to boredom and can lead to problems within the units. So that access to programming, both probation programming, other agency programming, in particular substance use disorder treatment programming, and helpful programming for the growing age of the population, including some of the things that were mentioned before, like workforce development, are things that came very clear through our inspection. The other thing that I think I will say that's most alarming about the inspection of Los Padrinos is about culture and tone. That day was it was a challenging day, and honestly, I have a lot of empathy for the staff and youth who spend all day, every day in those facilities. It's stressful. And there were particular units where the stress levels were higher than others. It's hard to identify exactly why, but definitely there were units where some of the young people were able to articulate their concerns about regular and egregious searches and challenges with the interactions with staff and not feeling safe. I mean, I will say, even though this goes against exactly what I've been harping on for years, we had two young women in the girls' unit say, please don't take the OC spray away because when we get jumped, it's the only way that staff can intervene to stop the fighting. That's heartbreaking to me to hear. And that doesn't mean I think we should allow for the OC spray to stay, but I think we definitely need to find a way to change the tone and create a facility that the staff are safe and the staff are equipped and the staff are prepared to protect the safety of the young people so that we can build a rehabilitative environment. So again, I'd like to really welcome you to our town hall. I welcome you to read the inspections and know that we sincerely appreciate the collaboration, in particular with the probation department. It's a heavy lift on their part as well to have us in there all day, and also the staff of Juvenile Court Health Services, Department of Mental Health, and LACO for providing information on the day of the inspection and welcoming us into classrooms and into the clinics. We never have any problems with accessing information or facilities on the days of our inspections. That's actually an improvement over the first years. And so my gratitude goes out to the agencies. I'm happy to answer any questions, although probably Sarah will have better answers. So that's the extent of my report today.
Thank you. I might have said agenda item 7 and I meant agenda item 6. So Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments for item number 6?
We did not have any written public comment as of the beginning of this meeting. I don't think we do now. If there's anyone in the room who would like to make public comment, you're welcome to do so. Do we have anybody online? Okay.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? No? Okay. I will move us along to agenda item number 7, which is for matters not posted on the agenda to discuss or to place on a future meeting agenda for action. If you'd like to provide a public comment on the next item for general public comment, please raise your hand now on WebEx. If you're in the room, you can approach the front of the room to get in line. Commissioners, do you have any announcements or items you would like to be placed on future agenda? Commissioner Mundo? No? Okay. No? Commissioner Cadillo? Commissioner Terry? Commissioner Garcia-Lays? No? Commissioner Meredith?
First of all, I want to make a clarification comment. I've been cleared by county council to do this. I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
Can you talk into the microphone?
I'm not going to discuss personnel matters except to say that we had a caller earlier make some misinformation or malicious remarks about SDPO Reggie Torres. He is not off on leave for bringing drugs into a facility. That was incorrect. So I wanted to clarify that, number one. Do we have a contact that we deal with as a liaison to the POC at probation? Okay, the reason I bring that up is this last meeting we had Chief Robert Smythe here, Chief Renuelos here, and Lieutenant Strong, who's on loan to us from the Sheriff's Department. And we made a request, there's a motion here unanimously about a monthly report on contraband coming into the facility. If that's in the circumstances, was it brought in by staff, vendor, mother, whatever? I have yet to see that report, number one. And that was a mandate. It's in here every 30 days. So I'm going to hold those three. Rather than blame the department, I'm going to hold those three responsible for getting that to us. The second part of that is we had a request here is who is our liaison and what is the status with LAPD's in custody death of Ryan Diaz? I understand they can't discuss a lot of it because of liability reasons. However, they can at least brief us on, yes, LAPD is actively investigating it and here's who our liaison is. That didn't come in either. So again, I'm going to make a motion that we remind them that if we give them a mandate to do it 30 days, that is expected. It is unsatisfactory that they couldn't provide that.
So Commissioner Meredith, I think I started the meeting kind of with a similar sentiment that there have been all of these, I mean, I'm sure that probation has responded to many of our requests, but it seems that there are a handful, if not more than that, of requests that have gone kind of unfulfilled, unresponded to. And I guess my question for you, Wendy, is this like a moment where we're issuing a subpoena? Is this a moment where you like reiterate the motion? What happens?
Well, no harm in having another motion. You could have another motion if you want to reiterate this. I will say, so that meeting was November 9th. The next day was a holiday. I sent the formal request for all of that information on the Monday, the November 13th, and have since, we do a weekly recap of outstanding items that have also been submitted to the department, which have included the things you mentioned, the things Chair Kakani mentioned, as well as a couple of other outstanding items. So we did receive follow-up information on the call-outs, the HR data that was requested at that meeting, but the other items have not been received. So I will say you could do a motion if you want.
Okay.
And also I will continue to follow up with it.
Well, the reason I bring this up is on the prior commissions, we actually had a liaison from the department that interacted directly, and they would be at the meetings because the chief can't always be here. I understand that. But that liaison was always here and went back and said, this is the direction I have from the commission. So it doesn't have to be a motion, but I'm sure because the chief's going to look at this and he's going to say, why are we not following up? So, but I'm going to specifically, I'm not going to blame the department. I'm going to blame the 3 staff members that were here that was provided to. And that's what I'm expecting a response from.
Commissioner Canales?
Yeah, thank you for that, because Commissioner Kakani did bring up that in the very opening of the meeting, and I do wonder, like, so do we say, okay, if we still do not hear anything in January? Because when I was given this position, one thing I was explained was about the subpoena process. So, maybe send a reminder. I understand it's the holidays and a lot of people, are busy and have different things going on. But maybe in January, if we still have not received the motion, then how do we get the information to proceed with the subpoena, as Commissioner Kakani suggested?
Thank you for that question. And I actually spoke to Mr. Bates from the Office of Inspector General about this question in expectation that this might come up yesterday. And he said that, he said, and also it's in the ordinance, that you all obviously can request the support of the Office of Inspector General to put as you mentioned, the teeth on your request. So perhaps that is the motion that could be made if you're ready to do that. Or, I mean, I heard you, Commissioner Canales, say you wanted perhaps to wait until the next meeting. That's totally up to you.
Yeah, so I'll withdraw my motion. I'll go with, let's wait till the next meeting, because those three individuals, I'm sure, are going to hear about this, and the department. And if there's no compliance, then we step up to the OIG, and if necessary, the subpoena process.
Commissioner Canales, were there any? No? Okay. There are two issues that I would like to lift up for a future meeting. One of them is connected to Rebecca Ellis's article in the New York Times. And there were some significant concerns that were raised around when, allegations of harmful conduct are raised against staff. And while I understand that, at least 23 of the staff are on leave, some of these allegations are decades old. And in the article, it was named that some of the young people had made reports to higher ups and that presumably went unheard or ignored or unclear what happened. And this came up again as I was thinking about the use of force incidents and the thousands of cases that live in a backlog. And while I understand some of those cases are being reviewed now, many of those incidents are over a year old. And the Peace Officer Bill of Rights very clearly states that after a year from when an incident occurs, the department, the institution, the county can no longer initiate disciplinary proceedings. And so I'm not sure what it looks like to have someone come here and explain kind of what that process looks like. But if there was an incident, for example, in January of 2022, that was sitting in a backlog that no one reviewed until September of 2023, it's very possible that the officer or the DPO, DSO who was responsible or involved in that use of force incident that may have been outside of protocol will never face any sort of disciplinary consequences because it is outside of that 1-year statute of limitations that's delineated in the Peace Officer Bill of Rights. And so I would very much like for someone from probation to explain kind of what that process looks like. Maybe it's a report back on the use of force kind of backlog, since we never received the contract and we haven't received any updates on the cases, potentially something to subpoena for the next meeting, but certainly an explanation of, like, we hold young people accountable all the time. I've been hearing about a number of additional arrests that are happening inside our juvenile halls because of incidents taking place there. But it's not clear kind of what happens to the adults who may or may not be involved in these instances. So that was one thing that I wanted to raise. The second thing was education. I know that, we've heard about this Rising Scholars program where community college, higher education will be brought into the facilities. And I think kind of an explanation of what that could potentially look like, be it from OICR or other folks. And I would also ask for Jesus Corral, whose name I've heard about 1 million times, but whose face I have never seen, to potentially come here and explain kind of what it is that he is envisioning and how that aligns with what the potential is for the Rising Scholars program. Because I think the number of times that many of us have gone to, especially the SYTF facilities, or where there are folks who are in college who express an immense amount of like boredom and frustration connected to the education that they're receiving. Like there needs to be a response to that. And I know that higher education doesn't live with LACO. And I think that probation presumably has like the most hold on that. So having someone from probation present on what either they have kind of available to young folks by way of higher education and what OYCR and the Rising Scholars Program envisions as a potential would be super helpful. All right. Anything else? Okay. I think now we're moving on to agenda item number 8, which is an invitation from members of the public to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Wendy, if you could please facilitate public comment for us.
I will say, since the meeting started, we received a public comment on agenda item number 3 that will be attached to the final agenda and sent out to all the commissioners. It's related to the delays also faced by children's attorneys from Children's Law Center, similar to what was brought up during the agenda item. I'm looking at you, Janae and Ismail, to see if there's anyone signed up for public comment online. Looks like Mr. Bell is approaching the podium. You're welcome to do so. Nobody online? Okay.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say good job to the officers and the camps for their passing the BSCC. I know that kind of got overlooked with focusing on LP, but Alpha Ball receiving 100%, just want to make sure you guys get your kudos for that. Also, well, I know LP will get there too. One way, once we get the safety issue really worked out, as you said in your report, the young lady mentioned with the pepper spray, not taking that away, she feeling safe. Once everybody feels safe, I believe LP will get their BSCC straight as well. And shoot, I have one more thing to say. It's kind of slipping, so yeah, okay, I'll just leave it at that. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention was, I think I'll wait to see if it actually shows up on the agenda. Something Ms. Kanani was saying, but I'll wait to see if it shows up on the agenda and speak on it then. Thank you.
Is it a bad thing? Did I spell wrong again?
I think it's referring to, we combined our last name, Takani.
It's always Canales.
I know,
Thank you for that, Mr. Bell. And I will say the Camps Afflerbach page and Dorothy Kirby Center and Camp Scott, those inspections were conducted and completed by the POC much earlier in the year and finalized. Actually, the results of those inspections mirror very much what Bureau Chief Van Kirk mentioned in her report. So thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that. And certainly at the January 4th Town Hall, we will discuss the inspections of all of the facilities. Nobody else?
Okay, with that, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your comments. I think this is the first time that we've ended before the 1 hour mark.
3 years.
Hey, let's go, team. As a quick reminder, be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel at LA County POC. To receive reminders about our upcoming meetings, visit our website at poc.lacounty.gov. To subscribe to our email listing, can I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting? A motion to adjourn. Thank you, Commissioner Garcia-Leyes, seconded by Commissioner Mundo. Commissioner, please unmute yourselves and vote with a voice vote. Aye. Okay. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. It is now 12:18 p.m. on motion by Commissioner Garcia-Leyes, seconded by Commissioner Mundo. Today's meeting is now adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Right. Happy holidays to everyone.
We actually had to cancel lunch because we couldn't get them to bring it on earlier.
Summer, the meeting's over, baby.